Hello everyone, welcome to our audiobook channel. If you enjoy this story or want to hear more exciting content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Your feedback helps us improve and bring even more captivating stories. Enjoy listening. Chapter 1. Disaster in Jail. Inside the jail cell of Daifeng's Jingzhou courts, Su Qian woke to the smell of damp rot. The stench unsettled his stomach. Where is the smell coming from? Did Ha poop on the bed again? Judging from the smell, it might be near my head. Su Qian had a Siberian husky named Ha. He had moved to Beijing and spent the past 10 years working. The loneliness prompted him to adopt a dog for companionship and recreation, not in the sexual way, mind you. Eyes opened, he surveyed his surroundings and was dumbfounded. There was a stone wall with a window the size of 3 rice bowls. Sunlight streamed in from the uncharitable opening. Su Qian was on a tattered straw mat, the light illuminating his chest and the motes of dust in the air. Where am I? Su Qian spent some time in a trance-like state thinking about life. He began to doubt reality. Did I die? Before he could react, a wave of memories crashed against his mind. The information was swiftly uploaded into his brain. Su Qian. Courtesy name. Ninjian was a constable in the Daifeng dynasty, appointed by the Changle County courts. Changle County was under the governance of Jingzhou City. His monthly pay was 2 silver taels and a stone of grain. His father was a soldier who died 19 years ago in the Battle of Shanhai Pass. Soon after, his mother passed away due to sickness. Su Qian felt a twang of sympathy. Everyone knew it was rough to lose both parents. Su Qian felt his teeth ache. The cop life chose me even in reincarnation. In his previous life, Su Qian had graduated from the police academy and joined the forces. It had been a secure job. The career path was endorsed by his parents, but his heart was never in it. He never took to being a public servant. He liked being free and unconstrained, and he appreciated a life of luxury and materialistic wealth. The words left by Ji Shanqing in his diary echoed with him. Hence, Su Qian decided to quit his job and start a business venture. But how did I end up in a jail cell? Su Qian sifted through the memories in his head to find the answer. Orphaned, Su Qian was raised by his uncle, Su Pingzi. As Su Qian practiced martial arts, his uncle had spent more than 100 silver taels each year on his lessons, a fact that made his aunt dislike Su Qian. At the age of 18, Su Qian reached maximum refinement and the lessons stopped. Under the insistence of his aunt, he moved out of the Su family house. Through his uncle's connections, Su Qian managed to land a job in the county courts as a constable. Life was pretty good. 3 days ago, his uncle, a 7th-ranked official stationed in the armed guards, was delivering a cargo of silver taels to the Ministry of Revenue. During the journey, an incident caused them to lose some of the cargo. A total of 150,000 silver taels was found missing. The courts and the people were shaken. Furious, the emperor demanded Su Pingzi to be executed within 5 days. The punishment extended to 3 generations of the Su family. The men would be banished to the kingdom borders while the women would be sent to the entertainment school. As Su Pingzi's nephew, Su Qian was unsurprisingly sacked and thrown into jail. 2 days. In 2 days, he would be banished to the harsh, deserted borderlands. There, he would be expected to toil for the rest of his life. Su Qian felt a shiver down his spine. There was little hope in his heart as he muttered, already at a disadvantage from the start. Is this some sort of hell? The memories told him he was in a feudalistic period. Human rights were non-existent, and he dreaded to think how life at the borders were like. The lands were barren and the weather was horrid. A majority of the criminals sent to the borders did not live past 10 years, and many died from accidents and disease before even reaching the borderlands. As the thoughts filled his mind, Su Qian felt a chill on his scalp. System. Su Qian's tentative voice broke the silence in the jail cell. There was no response. System, father, system, "Come on out," Su Qian pleaded. Pin-drop silence greeted him. There was no system. How could it be? This meant there was no way he could change his circumstance. 2 days later, he would be sent to the borders in shackles. His physical health suggested he would survive the trip. Surviving was not all that ideal. Su Qian had been a tool for the courts, and the remainder of his life would be squeezed out of him through hard labor. Horrible, just horrible. Any grand illusion Su Qian had about the ancient period was quickly shattered and replaced by anxiety and fear. I have to find a way to get myself out of this situation. I can't just die like this. Su Qian paced around in the tiny jail cell, his anxiety palpable. Like a cornered beast, he racked his brain for a solution to his predicament. I am a martial artist with maximum refinement. I have an impressive physique, but in this world, I am only second to last on the hierarchy. Escaping is impossible. Was he to rely on family and friends? The Su family was not huge, many of their kin were scattered across the lands. Regardless, the 150,000 missing silver taels would make anyone hesitate to help. Who would dare to beg for mercy in this crucial moment? According to the laws of Daifeng, atonement for one's crime could exempt one from capital punishment. Finding the silver. Su Qian's eyes glimmered as if he had a solution, like a drowning man clutching at straws. He was a true blue graduate of the police academy. Logic and reasoning were his strong suits. He had a wealth of theoretical knowledge and notable experience in investigations. Perhaps he could put the skills to use, solve the case, return the silvers, and clear his family's name. However, the light in his eyes dimmed after a thought came to mind. To solve the crime, he had to have the case file and understand the details. An investigation required solid facts and evidence for a breakthrough. Trapped in a jail cell, there was nothing he could do without a divine intervention. Another 2 days and he would be sent to the borders. He was in a bind. Su Qian's eyes unfocused as he sat on the ground. He had had too many drinks a day ago and passed out drunk. The next thing he knew, he was in jail. Did he die of alcohol poisoning and crossed over to this era? The gods must have wanted him to suffer. Why else would he be reincarnated as a prisoner in the ancient period? In the olden days, banishment was just a stone's throw away from capital punishment. He had been beaten down by society, but at least life was peaceful and prosperous in the modern era. If given a second chance, he would have stolen his parents' money to buy a house. Then, he would conspire with his mother to break his father's hands to keep the man from losing money in the stock market. As these thoughts swirled in his head, the sound of a sliding chain could be heard at the end of the corridor. The door was unlocked. Footsteps followed. A jailer was escorting a handsome but weary scholar. They stopped in front of Su Qian's cell. The jailer eyed the scholar. 15 minutes. The scholar folded his hands in obeisance and nodded. Once the jailer was out of the earshot, the scholar turned to face Su Qian. He was dressed in an ivory robe and his long black hair was held up with a jade hairpin. He had a striking profile, sharp eyebrows, sparkling eyes, and thin lips. Memories relevant to the scholar surfaced in Su Qian's mind. The man was Su Zinian, the second son in the family. Su Zinian was the first biological child of Su Pingzi, making him Su Qian's cousin. The scholar had just passed the autumn imperial provincial exam this year. Su Zinian gave Su Qian a level stare as he said, "The soldier escorting you to the borders took the money, 300 silver taels was all we have left. Rest assured the journey will be as safe as it can be. How about you?" Su Qian asked out of unusual concern. The memories told him the relationship between the cousins was strained. Due to the aunt's dislike toward Su Qian, his cousins kept their distance from him. Only his uncle truly treated him as family. Additionally, the host's memories also informed him about Su Zinian's skill for words, profanities in particular. Su Zinian answered impatiently, "My name has been expelled from the list of scholars. The academy has vouched for my character, as such I am exempted from banishment. Focus on your own well-being. When you're at the borders, rein in your temper and survive. A year alive is a year blessed. Su Zinian had been studying in the famous White Deer Academy in Jingzhou City. He was acknowledged to be a gifted scholar, having just recently passed the imperial examination. Therefore, the incident with his father did not see him thrown into jail. Su Zinian was not allowed to leave the city, but he had kept busy the past few days. Su Jian was silent. He did not believe the Su family would have it any better here in Jingzhou City. In addition to having his scholarly titles revoked, Su Zinian would be blacklisted. His children and grandchildren would be barred from the imperial examinations and kept out of the courts. 2 days later, the women of the Su family would be sent to the entertainment school to be humiliated. Su Zinian was a born and bred scholar. How would he survive in Jingzhou City? Being banished might be a better alternative for him. A thought crossed Su Jian's mind. He stepped forward and gripped the bars between them. You plan to commit suicide? An unexplainable sadness filled his heart. I don't even know this man. Su Zinian kept his hands in his sleeves. With a neutral expression, he said, "It's none of your business." A moment later, the scholar averted his eyes. His expression softened as he said, "Live." With that, he turned to walk away. Wait. Su Jian grabbed the man's sleeves before he could leave. Su Zinian paused and looked at Su Jian. Can you tell me about the case? The missing tax money. Chapter 2. Mischief by monsters. Su Zinian frowned. What do you need it for? I intend to solve this case, Su Jian thought. I want to die knowing the reason for my punishment, else I will never have peace. Revealing his true intentions might gain him some odd looks from Su Zinian. His cousin might think he had gone off his rockers. The original Su Jian was a pig-headed and strong-willed man. Su Zinian sighed and said, I have seen the script. I'll tell you what I know. The past few days had been a rush for Su Zinian as he went around the city asking for assistance. The crime was too severe for anyone to be willing to help. After a series of rejections, Su Zinian changed tactics and decided to find out where the tax money could have gone. With the help of the household staff and his relationship with the academy, Su Zinian managed to bribe an official in Jingzhou City to make a copy of the case details. He had studied the script and put his logical mind to use. He did not give up trying to solve the case of the missing tax money. Su Jian raised a hand to stop his cousin. Write it down. The spoken words hold no meaning. The details of the case laid in the script, they must be digested and deliberated. A verbal recount would split his attention and reduce his thinking ability. In his past life, Su Jian was known for his logical reasoning. He stood out among his peers for the exact reason. A week ago, Su Zinian would have ignored his cousin. The moment could be the last Su Zinian ever saw of Su Jian. Therefore, he agreed to fulfill his older cousin's request. A moment. He left in a hurried pace. As the sound of footsteps faltered, Su Jian leaned back against the metal bars and slid down to a sitting position. His heart was beating wildly. He was not confident to turn things around. His wish to solve the case was just a wish after all. It was a last-ditch effort to save himself. No one could fault him for trying. Modern-day police investigations placed emphasis on 3 main aspects: crime scene investigation, surveillance, and autopsy. There were no deaths in this case and no surveillance in the ancient world. Being stuck in jail, Su Jian could perform none of the above. His last hope was the scroll which would allow him to gain some insights about the crime scene. Su Jian took in the host's memories and did his best to rid himself of the negative emotions. A calm mind was essential for clear and rational thoughts. He mumbled, life or death, it all depends on this. Half an hour passed before Su Zinian returned with a few sheets of fine paper. The ink was still fresh when he passed the papers to Su Jian. My time is up, I'll have to take my leave, Su Zinian said. After a moment's hesitation, he delivered his parting words. Take care of yourself. Su Qian did not respond. His attention was fully on the fresh script. Time was of the essence. The fact was reflected by the messy handwriting. If Su Qian had not had a few years of private study lessons, he would have struggled to decipher the ghoulish script. The importance of studying. If the host could not read, I would be doomed, Su Qian said with a chuckle. The case of the missing tax money went as such. 3 days ago, at 6:30 in the morning, Su Pingzi was escorting a cargo of tax money back to the city. At 7:15 in the morning, as the group was approaching Guangnan Street, the winds picked up and startled the horses. They were on a bridge as this happened and the horses ran toward the river. At that moment, a deafening explosion was heard and a wave that was the height of 6 men emerged from the river. Muddy water rained from the sky. The soldiers assigned to the guard detail went into the river to search for the fallen cargo. A total of 1,215 silver taels were recovered while the rest were declared missing. There were eyewitness testimonies from passers-by and the soldiers on duty. Amidst the testimonies, Su Qian noticed a phrase highlighted in cinnabar. Read, "Mischief by monsters. Mischief by monsters." Su Qian's eyes narrowed as his heart sank. After 3 days of hustling, the trio who were responsible for the case of the missing tax money gathered in one of the many halls within the Jingzhou courts. The governor of Jingzhou City, Chen Hangang, had a porcelain teacup in one hand. The lid was in his other hand as he gently tapped against the mouth of the cup. The man wore a stern expression. He was clad in a scarlet robe with goose-patterned embroidery, a sign of a fourth-ranked court official. The emperor has ordered for the silvers to be found before Su Pingzi's execution. 2 days are all we have left, let us pick up our pace. Governor Chen was addressing the people in the room. There was a man dressed in a black uniform with a dark cloak draped over his shoulders. The man had a sharp nose and a pair of brown, deep-set eyes. He looked to be mixed blood, southern barbarian. The other person in the room was a young woman in a yellow robe. Delicate features graced her oval face. She had flawless skin and her eyes were bright with excitement. She held a sugar cane in her hand. A small deerskin pouch and an 8 trigrams feng shui compass were tied to her waist. A pair of finely embroidered shoes with cloud patterns peeked out underneath her skirt. A merry band of people. They were assisting Chen Hangang with the case. The middle-aged man was Li Yuchun, a member of the night squad that was feared by all Daifeng officials. The night squad was involved in investigations, captures, interrogations, military intelligence, strategy planning and more. They were a separate entity from the ministries and the military. The night squad was the emperor's personal intelligence squad. Their existence was akin to a guillotine that hung over every official's neck. Every official in Daifeng knew the phrase, "Those who did wrong will face the night squad." The yellow-robed woman was also someone of note. She was the disciple of the principal imperial astronomer. The middle-aged man frowned at the pile of bagasse by his feet, the handiwork of the young woman who had been chewing on sugar cane. The silver medallion on his chest glimmered as he waved his hand. The air in the room moved in response, sweeping the plant fibers to the side. Satisfied with the results, the middle-aged man nodded faintly. He faced Governor Chen with a grim expression. "The case is shrouded in mist. There are oddities that make me believe we're looking at it from the wrong perspective. Master Li, do explain. Time is not on our side. We should be hunting down the monster responsible instead of coming up with new theories." Governor Chen frowned. Their analysis thus far suggested the deed was done by monsters. In the recent years, the empire's coffers had dwindled as disasters struck at a higher frequency. The missing silver taels amounted to a year's worth of tax collection from a standard county. The emperor's anger was justified. It was a heavy blow to the already devastated imperial coffers. Governor Chen had taken up the case rather unwillingly. The responsibility was a burden that disturbed his sleep and appetite. The middle-aged man shook his head but refrained from arguing. He changed the topic. Any progress with Su Pingzi? Governor Chen shook his head. He's a man of brawn, all he did was cry foul. He said he had no idea how the silver tails went missing. The woman in yellow said, I read his chi, he was not lying. Li Yuchun and Governor Chen nodded. Silence resumed. As the party responsible for the tax money, Su Pingzi had been subjected to countless investigations and interrogations. They had looked into his social network and financial circumstances. Coupled with the imperial astronomers' chi reading, they had eliminated Su Pingzi as the culprit. Of course, the silver tails were still gone. The man's failure to perform his duty meant a death sentence was inevitable. The middle-aged man and Governor Chen were tense. In contrast, the young woman chewed on her sugar cane with little care in the world. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps was heard. A bailiff came in carrying a small bamboo tube. In his other hand was a paper wrapping containing warm meat buns. The bailiff handed over the bamboo tube. The young woman did not take the offered item. Instead, she stared at the bailiff's other hand. The bailiff reversed the order of his delivery. The young woman happily chomped down on the meat bun before taking the bamboo tube. She pulled out the message and read it aloud. A 20-mile search radius and my men found no signs of monsters in the river. No signs along the riverbank. Bang. The pressure in the room reached a critical point. Governor Chen slammed his fist onto the table and roared. Where can 150,000 silvers disappear to? It's been 3 days, they should have washed up on the banks. What despicable monster dares to steal the silvers of the Daifeng Empire? I'll make sure they are exterminated. If the silver tails were not recovered, Governor Chen would be another scapegoat. He was in the hot seat and the emperor had little qualms about doling out punishments. Such was the way of the courts. The climb was arduous but the fall was swift. Li Yuchun let out a huff. I think we have been looking at it the wrong way. It's possible monsters had nothing to do with this. Governor Chen kept a lid on the anger in his chest. He turned to the middle-aged man and said, if not monsters, then how do you explain the demonic wind? How did the silver tails disappear without a trace? What caused the huge explosion that destroyed the riverbanks? Chapter 3. Logical reasoning in the world of fantasy. No one had the answer for the questions fielded by Governor Chen. Li Yuchun said, why would monsters steal the silver tails? After a moment's thought, Governor Chen replied, there is no rhyme or reason to the actions of monsters. This line of questioning will only beget more questions. The young woman in the yellow robe spoke up in between bites. Human meat would be tastier to the monsters. Wait a moment while I finish my food. She endeavored to finish the 2 meat buns. With her cheeks stuffed, she took a gulp of tea to help the food down. Once she was done, she explained, monsters are instinctive creatures. The live humans running around should have caught their attention. Even if they wanted some silvers, they would resort to petty theft, not ambushing a cargo of tax silvers. It was incredibly risky to attempt a robbery in broad daylight on the busy streets of Jingzhou City. Governor Chen nodded. You are not wrong. We cannot rule out human involvement. Li Yuchun squinted. Who ordered monsters to steal the tax money? For what reason? Why target this cargo? Why steal exactly 150,000 silver taels? The mastermind needs a large sum of money but they want to keep it on the hush. More accurately, they can't accumulate such wealth without calling attention to themselves, Governor Chen said. So they decided to rob a tax collection. The young woman pursed her painted lips. The path taken by the cargo was a last-minute decision and yet the monster was able to lie in wait in the river. It's possible someone in the guard detail was in on the plot, Li Yuchun said. He turned to Governor Chen and said, should we pay a visit to Master Ru in the White Deer Academy? The young woman in the yellow robe eyed the middle-aged man. Are you looking down on the imperial astronomers' chi reading skills? I already said, the soldiers on duty knew nothing about the incident. The cogs turned to a stop. Silence filled the air as the group processed the details. Li Yuchun stared at the scroll while Governor Chen let out a deep sigh. The young woman fiddled with the feng shui compass at her waist. She had to leave the courts before sundown to make it for her dinner with the princess. The imperial kitchen served the best dishes in the empire. Unlike the two men, the young woman in yellow was just supporting the investigation. Kwei, the young woman in yellow, was not an official, therefore the responsibility rested lighter on her shoulders. Governor Chen's eyes twitched. Our progress has been too slow. I'm getting anxious as time slips past. Master Li, why don't you consult Elder Wei? The middle-aged man side-eyed the governor. Just like court officials, the night squad is subjected to inspections. Truth be told, this case was assigned to me by Elder Wei as a test. Governor Chen had a bitter smile. If this case remains unsolved, I can kiss my position goodbye. The whole empire is watching us. The air thickened as the two men stared at each other. I can't do anything if it's done by a monster. Su Qian paled after reading the case. He could feel the gods taunting him. There were monsters in this world. Their kind had existed alongside humankind since the beginning of history. Humans and monsters hunted animals and each other. At the southern borders, there was a mountain range called the 100,000 Mountains. Within those mountains laid the monster realm, an area that had a high population density of monsters. 500 years ago, the Western Zhou Kingdom declared war against the Monster Kingdom under the guidance of Buddha. The war lasted 60 years and ended with a severely wounded monster realm. The legendary war was known as the 60 Years of Pacification in history books. Since then, the monster race had suffered a series of bad luck and faded into the background. In contrast, Buddhism blossomed in the aftermath of the war. According to Su Qian's knowledge, humankind was victorious in the fight over the top spot of the food chain. If the monsters were responsible for the missing silver tails, Su Qian would have to hunt them down to save the Su family. Being second to last on the hierarchy, Su Qian did not believe he could change his fate. The weather was chilly as autumn approached. Beads of cold sweat rolled off Su Qian's back. He feared for his life. After consuming the host's memories, he knew he stood no chance in escaping the jail cell. He also knew in a society where the emperor's rule was absolute, human rights were non-existent. Law and order were based on the whims of a single person. His fantasy of a languid life in the ancient civilization, writing poetry and being pretentious, was shattered by reality. Even in his second life, society was still handing it to him. No. This is just a theory by the court officials in Jingzhou City. I must not let their words taint my outlook. There is still hope. There is still hope. The urge to live calmed his mind as strict logical reasoning took over. Why did the monster want silver? Wouldn't human flesh be more attractive? And if they needed silver, why did they target the tax collection? From the books, it seems the female monsters are the pinnacle of beauty, with unmatchable physiques. I wonder if there are cat girls or puppy girls in this world. Smack. Su Qian gave himself a slap on the face. Focus on the case. The most important step in logical deduction was elimination. He had to comb through each clue and piece them together. Without proper analysis, the case would become a tangled mess. The case of the missing tax money had two main facts. 1. The demonic wind. 2. After the silvers fell into the river, an explosion occurred. Excluding martial artists, a decent cultivator from any discipline would have the ability to summon a demonic wind. The facts were useless in narrowing down the suspect pool. However, the evidence was helpful in clearing his martial artist uncle's name. Of course, there was always the possibility that he had an accomplice. The second fact was the oddity. Explosions were common in fights between two high-ranking cultivators. However, there was no battle during the disappearance of the silver tails. The explosion made no sense. Unless the explosion was unavoidable, Su Qian muttered under his breath. In the world of cultivation, which occupation relies heavily on explosives, Su Qian's train of thought came to a halt. He realized he had made the same mistake as the court officials in Jingzhou City. They had followed the most obvious clues and concluded that the perpetrator was a monster. They had chased that line of thought and never turned back. The problem was their judgment had been too hasty. Su Qian had the complete memories of the host, but he made a point to think like a modern man. He utilized his experience from his past life. He perused the papers he was given and searched for the unwritten details before coming to a conclusion. A dead end. Perhaps I should try another approach. Rule out a monster attack. What if it was a plot by humans? There would definitely be flaws in the plan. As Locard's exchange principle states, in the commission of a crime, the perpetrator leaves something at the crime scene, and takes away with them something from the crime scene. Trace evidence was classified in two main categories. Concrete evidence was things like fingerprints, shoes prints, vehicle marks, tool marks, and more. The clues to solve the case laid in the trace evidence, not the two main facts. Su Qian replayed the case according to the script he received, his uncle accompanying the payload with a guard detail. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as his brain activity was at maximum level. If pheromones could visualize his state of mind, it would have kois in a pond fighting for food. The scene replayed again and again as his mind analyzed each detail. His brain operated like a high-speed CPU, parsing through the hidden messages and clues. The case became clearer as all the puzzle pieces fell into place. Suddenly, Su Qian felt his soul leave his body. He was in a different state, floating through the buildings. He ended up overlooking Jingzhou City. Time was rewinding, and the next thing he knew, the sun was peeking from the horizon. He watched as Su Pingzi led a squad of combat-ready soldiers on the road toward the Ministry of Revenue. It was 6:30 in the morning. The group was at Guangnan Street when the demonic wind blew. The horses were startled and rushed off into the river. Boom! An explosion in the river caused muddy water to shoot up. The explosion made Su Qian's heart shudder. His legs kicked instinctively and he woke up. Exhaustion was clear in his eyes, but the discovery rejuvenated him. I know what happened. I solved it. Su Qian let out a maniacal laughter as he beat on the bars of his cell. Someone. Anyone. Come quick. The jailer was roused by the noise and quickly grabbed a torch. What is this ruckus? Do you have a death wish? The jailer struck the bars to make Su Qian step back. Su Qian obliged, not wanting to lose his fingers. He said, I want to see the governor. A prisoner wants a meeting with the governor? Maybe you should take a look at yourself, the jailer mocked. He shoved the lit end of the torch toward Su Qian. Su Qian retreated into his cell. Backing out now, the jailer said as he fumbled for his keys. I'm going to break your legs. Su Qian stared at the man. I have important information regarding the case of the missing tax money. I need to see the governor. You will be held responsible if there's any delay in the proceedings. The jailer froze. In the hall, the young woman who had finished her meat buns went on to chew on the sugar cane. She fished out some preserved candy from her deerskin pouch and tossed them into her mouth. The discussion was getting gloomier and more desperate by the second. The emperor commanded us to solve this case within 5 days. It might be too late to recover the tax money, Governor Chen said as he paced around the room. Anxiety made it impossible to stay still. And my hands are tied with regards to the strict timeline. Any investigation was time-consuming. The governor clapped his hands together and said in a low tone, I will personally beg Elder Wei. Hand me the scroll. Li Yuchun deliberated for a moment. I'll go with you. The young woman glanced at the pair and said sweetly, with the aid of such an important figure in Dafeng, you too will be spared by the emperor. However, to be in Elder Wei's bad books is much worse than being blamed by the emperor. The young woman smiled, revealing two sharp canines. The middle-aged man's expression was sullen. At that moment, a bailiff in black clothing hurried into the room. He bowed before saying, "Governor, a jailer reported that Su Pingzi's nephew, Su Jian, has important information regarding the missing tax money and wishes to speak with you." The trio were surprised by the news. Su Jian, the man, played no part in the case. After the initial interrogations, they had decided the man was not involved. Governor Chen sighed and said, "Bring him in." Su Jian was led into the room. The monocles on his wrists and ankles announced his presence. There were smears of dried blood all over his body. Dressed in a prisoner's uniform, Su Jian stood before the governor. Chapter 4. Showtime. As he stepped into the hall, Su Jian could feel the razor-sharp gaze on him. The one in the goose-patterned scarlet robe would be the governor. The middle-aged man with the silver embroidery would be the night squad. "Damn, the lady is pretty. I wonder if she's married." A quick glance at her chest stemmed his excitement. Su Jian lowered his head to express his obeisance. On the high seat, Governor Chen adopted a strict demeanor as he questioned, "Su Jian, why did you not reveal the information 3 days before when we found you? Do you know the penalty of withholding information?" The governor was a seasoned court official. Although he was anxious to hear what the prisoner had to say, he refrained from revealing his eagerness. Being granted an audience meant Su Jian's plan was halfway to success. He maintained his composure as he said, "Governor, I only received the investigation details when Su Zinian visited me. First, tell the truth." The trio knew Su Pingzi's eldest son because they had interrogated him as well. "What does it have to do with what you know?" Governor Chen asked. "I deduced the truth from the details written on the scroll." "Hold on," the governor interjected and leaned forward. "The scroll." That was not what he was expecting. Su Jian nodded and said, "I have solved the case." Governor Chen held back from chasing the man out of the room. With a stern expression, he warned, "Say your piece, but let me warn you, nonsense will get you 200 lashes that will strip your meat from your bone." The disappearance of the tax money was done by humans, not monsters. The statement shocked the trio. Governor Chen slammed his hand down on the table and shouted, "Nonsense! Guard, take him back to jail. Add 200 lashes to his punishment." The robbery was done by monsters. It was the consensus they had come to. Any hope for a breakthrough was utterly dashed after hearing what Su Jian had to say. Evidently, it was an act of desperation. Curiosity flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes. He waved away the bailiff and said, "Governor Chen, let's not be hasty." He turned to Su Jian with an expectant look. "Carry on." Governor Chen was a temperamental man. Su Jian knew he had to take this opportunity to showcase his skills. "According to the city guards on the gates, my uncle entered the city at 6:30 in the morning. At 7:15 in the morning, the group arrived at Guangnan Street. At that point, a demonic wind blew and the spooked horses ran into the river." Su Jian made sure his voice was calm and level in order to appear confident. Governor Chen nodded. "We surmised the monster was hidden in the river to ambush the cargo." "No." Su Jian rebuked. "The demonic wind and the river explosion were just distractions. There is one discrepancy that tipped off the mastermind's plan." "What's that?" Governor Chen asked eagerly. The middle-aged man leaned forward, straining his ears to listen. The young woman dressed in a yellow robe suckled on her honey-coated candy. Her sharp, animated eyes locked onto Su Jian, an amused expression on her face. They had gone through the scroll many times and knew the case like the back of their hands. What did they miss? "My uncle was delivering a cargo of 150,000 silver taels. Do any of you know the actual weight of the cargo?" The middle-aged man was stoic. The young woman angled her head, deep in thought. Unimpressed, Governor Chen said, "Don't beat around the bush. Su Jian had intended to drop hints so the trio could arrive at the correct conclusion themselves. His intentions were clearly not appreciated. "You ancient people are a bit slow, aren't you?" Su Jian thought. "The answer is 9,375. Caddies. Based on the traditional unit of mass, 16 taels made 1 caddy. 150,000 silver taels was 9,375 caddies heavy." The middle-aged man frowned. Had he caught onto something? "What is the significance?" the young woman asked. Her voice rang clear as a bell. "Clearly you're not the brightest bulb," Su Jian thought. "How far are the city gates to Guangnan Street?" The middle-aged man replied, 30 miles. "How many towns are on the way?" 4. "What is the pace of tired horses?" Tired horses. The middle-aged man's eyes widened. He rose from his seat. The man was enlightened as evidenced by his shocked expression. 3 days of tracking and hunting had proved fruitless. As an experienced member of the night squad, he had an inkling something was not right. However, he could not come up with a better explanation, so he went along with the monster theory. Governor Chen felt his skin prickle. His inability to solve the case led to a bruised ego. He shot a glance at the young woman and was relieved to find her looking clueless as well. The young woman asked in a bored tone, "Where's the problem?" The middle-aged man said excitedly, "The timing doesn't fit. Guangnan Street is 30 miles from the city gates and they had to pass through 4 towns. If they entered the gates at 6:30 in the morning, they could not have reached Guangnan Street at 7:15. He had latched onto the most obvious theory that a monster was involved in the disappearance of the tax money. However, with Su Jian's help, Li Yuchun was able to see the discrepancies. The young woman said in a crisp tone, "Eyewitnesses can corroborate the cargo was on Guangnan Street at 7:15 in the morning. There's no way the common folk lied." "That's right." Governor Chen agreed. The middle-aged man turned to look at Su Jian. Su Jian said with unshakable confidence, "The load they were escorting was not silver taels." "Nonsense. Are you saying your uncle and the escorting soldiers are blind?" "There were many bystanders on scene to witness the silvers fall into the river," Governor Chen retorted. He waved the scroll in his hand and asked, "Are you telling me even the script is a lie?" "The eyes can be fooled. I can illustrate my points. Can I have some paper and ink?" Su Jian gestured to the stationery on the table. Governor Chen gave his consent. Su Jian dragged the monocles with every step he took. He added some water into the inkstone and began grinding. He spread out some paper and got to work. He wrote down his request and handed it to Governor Chen. "If you could please arrange for these to be prepared." Governor Chen read the request and was confused. "Allow me." The young woman wanted to join in on the fun and asked for the sheet. She was equally confused. Li Yuchun glanced at the paper and maintained a stoic expression. He flattened the paper before handing it back to the governor. 1 caddy equals 500 grams. Chapter 5. A riddle to be solved. In 15 minutes, 2 bailiffs entered with the things Su Jian requested. The trio surveyed the items, then turned to look at Su Jian. Governor Chen's deep voice boomed. "The things you requested are here. I expect a satisfactory answer." There was less indignance in his tone. During the wait, the 4th-ranked court official had processed the prisoner's words and saw the sense in them. However, further clarification was needed on certain parts of the case. What happened to the silver taels that fell into the river? Governor Chen had no clue about the whereabouts of the missing silvers. "If my contribution to the case proves fruitful, can you appeal to the emperor for an absolution of the Su family?" Dai Feng placed heavy emphasis on the male lineage. A father's crime can be absolved by a son's merit. "Naturally," Governor Chen said. Su Jian nodded and knelt before the assortment of items: a candle, salt, a porcelain cup and some metal wire. He planned to perform a high school chemistry experiment, sodium metal extraction. The ancient world lacked two things for the extraction to work: electricity and the heat source. However, Su Qian knew this world had a specialized occupation who could perform such feats. The sixth-rank sorcerer of the imperial astronomer specialized in alchemy. The role of an alchemist was well known throughout Daifeng. They were responsible for new inventions that made life easier for the common folk. While the material that fell into the river might not be pure sodium, Su Qian wanted to introduce an alternative explanation for the river explosion. The initial phase of an investigation often required a bold hypothesis and strong reasoning, followed by rigorous testing and evidence collection. A murder case from his past life resurfaced in his mind. He and his fellow detectives had missed many nights of sleep to pore through the case file and evidence locker. They had gone through the details again and again, switching up the variables and forming new hypotheses. An alchemist could cause an explosion even if the cart was not loaded with sodium metal. That was good enough. Su Qian only wanted to point the investigators in the right direction. With the right theory in mind, they should be able to apprehend the true mastermind. Persistent efforts in tracking down the elusive monster would only bring failure, and if or when they realized their mistake, Su Qian would have been long gone. Su Qian dissolved the coarse salt in water, and after a simple filtration, he poured the salt water into the porcelain cup. Then, he heated the cup over the candle flame. He stirred the contents with a bamboo toothpick. After some time, the water turned into steam, and what was left was a crystalline solid, sodium chloride. This was a purification step to obtain sodium chloride crystals. Governor Chen, the middle-aged man, and the beautiful young woman gathered around Su Qian. Su Qian raised his head and gave the young woman in yellow a smile. The lady is a disciple of the imperial astronomers. He took note of the feng shui compass at her waist, a specialized instrument used by those associated with the imperial astronomers. The young woman made a sound of agreement and smiled. My mentor is the principal imperial astronomer. Her oval-shaped face was as fair and flawless as a peeled egg. The disciple of the principal imperial astronomer. Well, I guess I can overlook the disappointing chest area, Su Qian said in a gentle tone. Can I trouble the lady to melt these crystals? The melting of sodium chloride is 800 degrees Celsius. The young woman pursed her lips. Only an alchemist has the ability to control fire. I'm at the rank of a feng shui sorcerer. I have a magic tool given by my master, the young woman said as she held out the feng shui compass. Her fingers danced across the instrument and the word fire glowed. Stand back. Su Qian took a step back. In a flash, a bright flame shot toward the porcelain cup. Stop! Su Qian shouted. He approached the cup and placed two metal wires into the container. He asked the young woman, Electrice, I know, lightning. You have to control the energy. It's a difficult step and we might need to repeat if it fails. The young woman spun the compass and the word lightning glowed. Sparks of electricity danced above the porcelain cup and made contact with the wires. Hiss! A chemical reaction was ongoing in the porcelain cup. Stop! Su Qian held his breath as he inched forward. Inside the porcelain cup laid a piece of metallic solid. Surrounding the pure metal were the salt crystals and other impurities. Success on the first try. To Su Qian's joy, the voltage delivered was precise. The electrolysis of sodium chloride required a voltage between 6 to 15 volts. Su Qian had expected a few trial rounds were needed to produce the pure metal. Who knew luck was on his side? Governor Chen and the middle-aged man rushed forward to look into the cup. The extracted metal had a silvery appearance. Governor Chen's eyes narrowed as his heart rate picked up. Li Yuchun clenched his fist. He stared at the metallic solid. The fog in his mind was cleared away with the lightning strike. Su Qian used paper to wrap the pure metal. Please have a look. This metal is lighter than silver but has a similar appearance. Someone could have passed it off as silver tails. Something to ruminate on. He handed the piece of metal to Governor Chen. The surface of the metal was slowly becoming dull and the end result was no different from the color of a silver tail. The middle-aged man palmed the wrapped metal in his hand and said, "It is very light. The timing would make sense if the horses were carrying this instead of actual silver. Lady Kwei, have a try." The young woman took stock of the wrapped metal. She shot Su Jian a curious look. "Are you an alchemist?" "No, I studied chemistry." The learned man knew to ask the right questions. After the initial surprise, Governor Chen shook his head and said, "Maybe the silvers were replaced, but how do you explain the explosion? If it wasn't a monster, why would there be such a huge explosion?" Su Jian did not answer him. Instead, he walked to the table and tossed the sodium metal into the brush washing jar. A blinding flash emanated from the jar as smoke billowed out. The sodium reacted violently with the water and caused a crack to form on the jar. This Governor Chen was agog. The fake silver will explode upon contact with water, hence the huge river explosion, Su Jian explained. The middle-aged man muttered, "We were misled since the beginning. The explosion and the demonic wind were just red herrings. We wasted time tracking and hunting non-existent monsters. No wonder the chi reading showed no signs of monsters." Su Jian said, "The soldiers only managed to find around 1,000 silver taels because those were placed on top to mask the true contents of the cargo. The puzzle pieces fit together and revealed the truth." Su Jian. "Commendable, what you did is praiseworthy," the middle-aged man lauded. The man patted Su Jian's shoulders. A frown formed on his face when he saw Su Jian's disheveled attire and proceeded to fix Su Jian's collar. Su Jian was taken aback by the man's kind gesture. Governor Chen frowned. "If the silvers are counterfeit, where are the real ones?" The young woman spoke in a serious tone, "The tax money must have gone through many hands before entering the city. To carry out the interrogations, many officials will have to be called to jail. Tracing the silvers will be like finding a needle in a haystack. I believe the matter is beyond our jurisdiction and we should report to the emperor." Governor Chen nodded in agreement. The middle-aged man had a different opinion. The cargo had a guard detail throughout the journey. The fakes would have been noticed at one of the many checkpoints. The swap must have been carried out when the load was near the city. A glimmer of hope flickered in the governor's eyes. The pool of suspects was narrowed down significantly. "Ready the litter," Governor Chen called out as he exited the hall. The middle-aged man hurried after the governor. Su Jian shouted after them, "Please remember your promise to me." Chapter 6. The Dumbfounded Uncle. "Hey! How did the salt turn to silver?" the young woman in yellow robes named Kwei asked. There was a moment's hesitation before she offered a sugar cane to Su Jian. "Here, have some." "Is she bribing me?" The two men were long gone when Su Jian looked up. After some thought, he replied, "I came across some old text that mentions the secret transformation of salt into silver." The young woman's eyes widened. "Which text? Where did you find it? Who is the author?" "It was a high school textbook and the author was the Education Ministry." Su Jian said, "The text was damaged and lost but I remember the contents." A sharp intake of breath was heard. "Quick, tell me what you know." Su Jian let out a sigh. "I'm not in the mood to be someone's teacher. My life is still in peril." The young woman rolled her eyes at him and said, "You're a crafty person. The imperial astronomers have no sway in the courts. You will have to wait for the emperor's orders with regards to your punishment. There is no point bargaining with me. You guys could take me in. The principal imperial astronomer has some clout in the courts and asking for a prisoner shouldn't be a problem," Su Jian said. He had to secure an escape route for himself in the event the silver taels could not be recovered. The young woman in yellow robes gave Su Jian a once-over. "You're clearly born a martial artist. Why do you want to be a cultivator?" "Cultivation required an early start to build a strong foundation." Su Jian was a tad too old to be transitioning from a martial artist to a sorcerer. I don't need to have a significant role. I truly do admire the principal imperial astronomer and wish to serve him, Su Jian said earnestly. Then, tell me about the contents of that damaged text. A flicker of light danced in the young woman's black, almond-shaped eyes. In his past life, Su Jian had only seen eyes this unblemished on children. The contents are a tad complicated. Verbal teachings will be difficult as I will have to go into details for you to get the whole picture. Su Jian put out the bait. Chu Keiwei rolled her eyes and said indignantly, I am the brightest in alchemy in the realm. Su Jian chanted from memory, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon, sodium, magnesium, aluminium, silicon, phosphorus. What was the man saying? The young woman frowned and said, You're trying to trick me. Anyway, the imperial astronomers only accepts young disciples. She snatched the sugar cane from Su Jian's hand and left in a flurry. I am young. Su Jian had wanted to argue, but then he understood. The disciples of the imperial astronomers were selected at birth. Damn, the path of his choice was blocked. Su Jian spent the next 2 days fearing for his fate in the jail cell. He was worried the silver tails would not be found in time. Once he was banished from civilization, the return of the tax money would have changed nothing. He was also worried about Governor Chen's character. What if the man went back on his word and claimed full credit for the breakthrough? Su Jian had done all he could as a lowly prisoner, the rest was up to fate. He knew the horrors of a feudal society. Let the fates be the judge, he moaned to no one in particular. Clang. The metal door at the end of the corridor swung open. A jailer appeared before Su Jian's cell with a torch in hand, the other hand was pulling out a key. Su Jian, you have been set free. The news was melodious to Su Jian's ears. He clenched his fists to contain the happiness he was feeling. They found the silver tails. Come with me to sign the papers, then you're free to go. The jailer eyed him suspiciously before saying, You're one lucky man. How about my uncle? Su Jian asked. Pipe down. Don't ask so many questions. The jailer was in a foul mood and he chased Su Jian out of the cell with the torch. An official from the courts arranged for his release papers. After putting down his signature, the jailer handed him the clothes he was wearing when he was arrested. A bailiff escorted him out through the back of the Jingzhou city courts. As Su Jian stepped out onto the quiet street, the sun began to rise from the east. Su Pingzi was roused by the sound of the metal door. He opened his bloodshot eyes. The dirty and disheveled man bore a striking resemblance to Su Jian. On the other hand, Su Pingzi's own biological son Su Zinian was the handsome outlier. In the opposite cell laid his wife, Li Ru. She was also startled by the sudden noise. Fear was etched into her weary face. The husband and wife stared at each other. They were separated by metal bars and a corridor. Li Ru spoke first, I would rather die than enter the entertainment house. The woman was 35 years old and still a beauty at her age. Even after spending 5 days in jail, the filth and fear did not mar her countenance. What was the entertainment house? It was a woman's hell. Battered and bruised, Su Pingzi opened his mouth but found no words. Tears streamed down his face. My dear, it is all my fault. Let us die together, and I will be your ox or horse in the next life. Our children and my nephew. 5 days had passed and all that awaited him was the swing of the executioner's blade. The women in his household would be sent to the entertainment house. They had 2 daughters, a 16-year-old and a 5-year-old. The sound woke the 2 children who were curled up in the corner of the cell. The 5-year-old rubbed her eyes and called out for her mother. She was oblivious to the fate that awaited her. The 16-year-old sat up, messy hair framed a pale face. Unlike most girls, she had a prominent nose to go with her thin lips and big eyes. It made her stand out among her peers. She exuded a sense of calm beauty. The teenager shuffled toward her mother. Her eyelashes trembled as fear gripped her. A few jailers stomped over the weapons at their waist gave a threatening impression. Despair and resignation shone in Li Ru's eyes. Su Pingzi's knuckles were white as he gripped the metal bars. He clenched his jaw. He admitted the death penalty was appropriate for his failure of duty, but he disagreed with the punishment of his wife and daughters. Especially when his youngest was only 5 years old. Her future was bleak if she was sent to be raised in the entertainment house. No parent would want their daughter to endure that fate. The jailers caught their attention by knocking the metal bars with the hilt of their weapons. They opened their cells but did not bring out the monocles. Su Pingzi, come with me. After signing the papers, you'll be free to leave. I, Su Pingzi, am a loyal servant of the Empire. Wait, what did you say? Su Pingzi wondered if he had misheard. What was going on? I can leave? Did you say I can leave? Su Pingzi could not believe it. What happened? Am I not being executed? I don't know. Orders from the courts. Ask them yourself, the jailer answered gruffly. Li Ru's heart raced as she held the hands of her daughters. The family followed the jailers in silence to the end of the corridor. They aren't tricking us, right? Su Pingzi dragged his feet as he was badly injured. He was happy to be spared the chopping block but befuddled by the turn of events. Why would they trick us? A thought struck Li Ru. It must be Xinian. He must be busy calling in favors these past few days. It was the most likely explanation. Li Ru said, I believe Xinian's master was the assistant minister in the Ministry of Justice back in Yuanjing year 18. Yuanjing year 18 was 20 years ago. Su Pingzi was doubtful, but he knew no one else who wielded such power in the courts. Maybe. That's our capable son, Xinian. You should have let our son study martial arts instead of that bastard, Su Qian. The youngest daughter misheard the expletive and said, Mother, Bunny's cute. I want to eat a bun. She suckled on her thumb as she stared hungrily at her mother. All you do is eat, a bad-tempered Li Ru muttered, but the sight of her child's dirt-stained face softened her heart. Be good and you'll get your wish soon. Su Pingzi was too tired to argue with his wife. Su Xinian simply had no talent for martial arts, something Li Ru could never understand. Every son was perfect in the eyes of his mother. The group arrived at the signing area. Su Pingzi's hand trembled as he took the brush from the official. He penned his name and printed his finger. The whole process was sublime. Like a seedling breaking ground and stretching toward the sun. Although his financial situation remained unchanged, the world was a brighter place. His wife and daughters made their prints. Curious as to how they were rescued, he asked the official, Excuse me. Do you know the reason behind my release? Li Ru turned to look at the official. The case was solved and the silver was returned, came the reply. The silvers were recovered? Great. Amazing. Those darn monsters, how dare they steal Daifeng's tax money, Su Pingzi exclaimed. His excitement and relief were overwhelming. However, the laws in Daifeng meant the recovery of the tax money did not guarantee a pardon for his failure of duty. After all, Su Pingzi played no part in the retrieval of the silver taels. Why did the courts absolve him? A lighter sentence would be banishment. Master Su, here are your official robes. Keep them safe. The man handed Su Pingzi the green clothing which signified his position as a 7th-ranked military official. Su Pingzi was shocked to learn that his position was restored. He received the garment and asked in a low voice, Could you explain the situation? With his official robes in hand, Su Pingzi felt he could stand a bit straighter. The rescission of the death sentence was understandable, but it was unusual for a position to be restored. According to the laws of Daifeng, a person's crime can be absolved through the merits of his young, the official said. Little Nian, my dear, little Nian must have helped the courts find the missing silvers, Li Ru said with tears of joy in her eyes. Little Nian, my good son. Su Pingzi's eyes were misty. The official stared at the couple's theatrics, then said, your nephew, Su Jian, assisted the governor in solving the case. He just left. Chapter 7. What a pretty sister. Ninjian. Su Pingzi was shocked. The tears of joy rolled down Li Ru's face. Her expression was frozen. 2 days ago, Su Jian was calling for the governor. He had important information to report. After their meeting, Governor Chen solved the case. Therefore, your punishment has been lifted, the official explained. Right, so that's what happened, Su Pingzi stuttered. He had taken Su Jian in when he was just a babe. Su Pingzi was aware of his nephew's strengths and weaknesses. Hence, he doubted the official's story, but he said nothing. That bastard nephew Li Ru looked stricken. It was not their son's connections that saved them, but the unlucky nephew they took in. Was he not in jail? Head heavy with questions, Su Pingzi led his family out of the building. At the exit, he saw a man brushing his unkempt hair. It was Su Jian. The sight of his nephew dispersed all the queries in his mind. The born and bred martial artist felt a warmth in his heart. Tears prickling at the corner of his eyes, Su Pingzi strode up to his nephew and patted him firmly on the shoulder. He wanted to hug him, but his pride and masculinity stood in the way. Ninjian, I see you're well. The gesture nearly killed Su Jian. Uncle, glad to see your chi is still strong. It seems we're one rank apart, Su Jian said naturally, as if they were close friends. The pat on his shoulder was a surprise. He glanced over Su Pingzi's shoulder and saw the 3 other members of the family. Heh, who knew I'd get to see my aunt in such despair? The insidious thought appeared in his mind. Su Jian's attention was then captured by the teenager. The girl was in a drab prisoner's uniform and her hair was a mess. The sharp nose and common oval face made her appear mixed blood. She was at the age of blooming and her natural beauty was hard to resist. Su Jian was shocked to find out the sister was such a pretty girl. The girl was hazy in the host's memories, likely because the host paid little attention to her. There was a hint of resentment toward the girl due to his aunt's obvious bias. The host was distant toward his cousins. Noticing Su Jian's eyes on her, Su Lingyu greeted him, brother. Then, she lowered her head as if embarrassed. Her greeting was followed by another. Su Lingyu's juvenile voice called out. She tottered over to Su Jian and raised her head, a hopeful look in her eyes. Su Jian showed her his empty hands. I don't have sweets for you. I also just came out from jail. The host did not like his cousins, but he treated the youngest well. She was the least like her mother. What is jail? The young girl asked. It's the room you slept in for the past few days. Where's my other brother? Does he have sweets? He's not here. The disappointment on the little girl's face was evident. The brother she asked for was her biological brother, Su Zinian. She was too young to understand the difference between a brother and a cousin brother. The 5-year-old was not too bright, an inherited trait from her mother according to the host. Lastly, Su Jian turned to his aunt, Li Ru. The woman had always thrown her weight around the house. She never imagined the day would come when she had to show gratitude to her nephew. The attractive woman lowered her head and said rigidly, "Tha thank you, Ninjian." At that moment, a memory resurfaced in Su Jian's mind. A younger Su Jian had been chased out of the house by his aunt. That day, the young boy swore to the sky, "I, Su Jian, will achieve excellence in life. Just you wait." The memory was awkward, but Su Jian was glad to have his aunt humbled. From a third person's perspective, the testy relationship between the host and his aunt was not completely her fault. Su Jian's martial arts lessons had cost an arm and a leg. The money spent was equivalent to the life savings of some common folks. His aunt's disapproval was understandable, so he replied graciously, "There is no rush. Let us sit down and have a meal." You can say it again then. Liaoyu's sparkling eyes widened in surprise, then she glared at her nephew. Su Pingzi felt his temple throb. Let's go home. Su Zinian staggered back to the Su manor carrying a wine flask. The place that had housed him for 19 years was sealed off with a notice. There were no signs of human activity. The manor was cold and empty. He kicked open the front gates and stepped over the threshold. He took a few shaky steps into the courtyard before turning around to close the gates. Hanging oneself was a shameful deed, especially for a scholar such as himself. He did not want the authorities noticing. Su Zinian wanted to die with his pride intact. The walk from the outer courtyard to the inner courtyard felt like an endless journey. Su Zinian could read at the age of 3, he could memorize passages at 5, at 10, he was familiar with the scriptures. He got into the White Deer Academy when he was 14 and successfully passed the Imperial Provincial Examination when he turned 18. He was undoubtedly a gifted scholar. His intelligence and knowledge were the basis for his arrogance. He always hoped to bring honor to the Su family, to be a pillar of his family, so he carried himself with an air of pomposity. Su Zinian would rather go out with a bang than live a life of humiliation. At that point, he gulped down what was left of the alcohol and hurled the wine flask. The flask shattered on the ground. With alcohol swirling in his blood, he rushed to his room and started preparing ink. He would leave a poem in his name, the last goodbye. Laughter rang out from Su Zinian's lips as he carried the paper to the inner courtyard. A hemp rope was looped around a branch on the ginkgo tree. He was surprised to learn that in the face of death, he felt no fear. Instead, there was only an unprecedented relief. In that moment, he had a glimpse into the life of a mad scholar, to live unrestrained and with abandon. Without any fear of consequences, the whole world was beneath oneself. What was there to fear if death meant nothing? Jingzhou City was a prosperous city, known as the All-Benevolent City. Su Qian weaved through the busy streets of the city. Carts, wagons and horses added to the traffic. There were vendors on both sides of the street. Banners and posters competed for the attention of passers-by. A line of poetry read in his mind, "A wind blows, revealing a bridge amidst smokes and willows, banners and tents of jade swaying among 100,000 homes." In reality, Jingzhou City was more prosperous and populous than the featured setting Qiantang River in the poem. It was stated in Daifeng's geographical records, Yuanjing Year 1, the city population is at approximately 1.916 million. It was now Yuanjing Year 36. The population of Jingzhou City would have long since surpassed 2 million. The Su manor had housed the family and a few maids and servants. Since the closure of the manor, the household staff had been excused. The empty silence was deafening. Liaoyu stared at the inscription on the gates. It roused many feelings in her chest. I wonder how is little Nian doing? He must be incredibly worried. Before we were locked up, he made a promise to save us. She entered the manor. Real estate in Jingzhou City was expensive. A triple courtyard manor such as this would cost at least 5,000 silver taels, which meant the down payment would be approximately 1,500 silver taels. Unaffordable housing is everywhere. I can never escape, Su Qian thought. He chewed his lips. Su Pingzi said reassuringly, little Nian is a man of wisdom. He must be toiling away for our sake. He's a reliable one, he'll be surprised to find us home when he comes back. Oh no, Su Qian suddenly remembered his conversation with Su Zinian. The man had planned to commit suicide. In the eyes of Su Pingzi and Liaoyu, the second son of the Su family was a stoic and steadfast man of rationale. Ha 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 ha, I am an unshackled man in life and a cruel demon in death. Su Zinian is a talent and a gift, yet the gods punish me. Why? If I was not born, Daifeng would have been in eternal darkness. The scholar stood on a chair under the ginkgo tree. He tore the hairpin from his head and shook out his hair. At that point, Su Zinian was unbridled and unrestrained. As he placed the noose around his head, he realized there was an audience. An unshackled man in life, a talent and a gift, Dafeng would have been in eternal darkness. His family had witnessed the drunken ramblings. Su Xinian stared at the unexpected arrival of his family and thought, I should have killed myself sooner. Chapter 8. Sister, why are you staring? Liu was the first to break the silence. Her voice cracked as she called out, Little Nian. The couple rushed to their son and pleaded for him to come down. The woman pulled her son into her embrace as sobs wrecked through her body. The man stood aside, sighing deeply. Su Qian studied the blank expression on his cousin's face and felt a pang of sympathy. There were a variety of humiliating scenarios a teen could go through: being caught dancing to the latest viral boyband music by your parents, speaking too loud when commenting about a teacher's behind, having your unrealistic self-insert story exposed. Any scenario could make a teenage boy die of embarrassment. If an actual suicide failed, a social suicide would do the job. I'm a trained officer of the law, I have to control myself. Su Qian stood at a corner and giggled silently. Su Lingyu scowled at her eldest brother's inconsiderate behavior while Su Lingyan took stock of the situation and decided against asking for candy. Being a quick-thinking scholar, Su Xinian decided the best course of action was to faint on the spot. Su Qian's room was located in the inner courtyard. He took off his clothes and got into the wooden tub. The water was cool against his skin. His body was at maximum refinement, giving him exceptional cold tolerance. The life and death ordeal was over. He could finally sit down and think about this world and his odd situation. Why can't I remember how the host died? I don't have the memories prior to passing out. Su Qian knew how his life in the modern world ended: alcohol poisoning. He had just been promoted and, amidst the fanfare, lost track of the number of drinks he had. After leaving the force, he had opened up his own business. Sadly, the business did not last the second year and he had had to restart from scratch. Hence, he played his part as a diligent worker of society. Su Qian had invited a few buddies to celebrate the good news. His life was on track. His new pay meant he could afford a housing loan, a betrothal gift. The next stage was marriage and family life. As long as his neighbor was not a Wang, all was good. Su Qian made a splash in the tub. What bad luck! All that effort to get into the middle class bracket and now I'm stuck here in a feudal society. The 600,000 bucks in my bank account waiting to be used for the down payment. What a waste. I'm alive but my money is a universe away. I guess my parents could make use of the money but the inheritance tax, and I almost reached legendary rank in League of Legends. I haven't watched the latest season of Attack on Titan. The national football team hasn't won the World Cup. What a way to die. **T. The 120 GB of porn on my hard drive. If his parents found out, it was social suicide for Su Qian as well. Gradually, Su Qian succumbed to his tired mind. When he woke up, the sky was dark. He had been soaking in the bath for more than the recommended time and his skin was pale and pruny. He got out of the water and put on some clothes. With the help of a copper mirror, he did some basic grooming. The face reflected on the mirror was young. Thick, bushy eyebrows were paired with an intense gaze. Years of martial arts practice gave him a lean physique. Su Qian gave himself an approving nod. Nowhere as handsome as Tony Leung or Louis Koo, but it's acceptable. His new body was better in many ways. He was stronger and faster, befitting of a martial artist. Of course, I'd rather be in a proper ancient setting where everyone was on a level playing field. In this setting, I might just get my head lopped off without noticing. This world had monsters and all sorts of cultivation disciplines. Martial artists were considered less fortunate as opposed to cultivators who could practice sorcery, Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, wizardry, and witchcraft. 600 years ago, when Dafeng was formed, the founding principal imperial astronomer drew up a broad classification system for the population. Su Qian was a 9th class focused on refinement, his uncle was an 8th class with elevated qi, the 7th class had access to divinity. The rest were unknown to him. Su Jian had some knowledge of the order within the imperial astronomers. The imperial astronomers were endorsed by the Daifeng dynasty, which led to sorcery becoming a popular discipline. Many household inventions were derived from alchemy, the 6th rank practice of sorcery. In the sorcery discipline, practices were ranked. At the 9th rank, 1 learned medicine, 8th was qi mastery, 7th was feng shui mastery, 6th was alchemy, and so on. Su Jian knew only that much. Born and raised in the city, his knowledge of their practices was limited. At that moment, a lady in a green skirt walked in. Her name was Lu Er, she was his aunt's maidservant. "Big brother, you have been summoned for dinner," Lu Er greeted in a jovial tone despite the exhaustion in her eyes. She was sold to the Su family at the age of 10 and had served the lady of the house ever since. She had been worried about her own survival when the family was dragged to jail. It was a surprise to find them back after 5 days. According to the first daughter, the eldest had secured their safety. The maidservant was a delicate girl of 18 years. She was bashful in the presence of Su Jian. Su Jian said awkwardly, "That don't address me as the big brother." "But, you are the eldest," Lu Er said. He gave up the argument. The two left the inner courtyard and entered manor proper. Lu Er hesitated before saying, "I heard the lord and the lady arguing." "What about?" Su Jian asked. Lu Er whispered, "The lady wanted to know how the silvers were switched out and who was the perpetrator." The lord could not give an answer and they began arguing. "You know who did it, right?" On the way home, Su Jian had told his uncle the silver tails were not stolen during the commotion but were swapped beforehand. It seemed his aunt had overheard their conversation. As Su Jian stepped over the threshold, he heard a cry from the manor proper. Arms taut and head raised, the little bean Su Lingyan was directing her high-pitched cries at her mother. Su Pingzi was calmly sipping on his cup while Su Lingyu busied herself with the food. Su Xinian was trapped in his self-inflicted social isolation and made no eye contact. Li Ru rubbed her temple to quell the oncoming headache. When Lu Er stepped inside, Li Ru quickly ordered, "Take her. Take her." Su Jian approached the crying young girl and asked gently, "What's wrong?" "Mother lied. She said if we came back, she would take me to Gi Tower." "Father said it too," the little bean said with a sob. Gi Tower was a tavern that exclusively served officials. The child could not even remember her own siblings' names, yet she could remember Gi Tower after one visit. Su Lingyan was not stupid, she just had wrong priorities. Su Jian eyed his uncle who was sipping his wine and unfazed by the commotion. The man had used his daughter to change the conversation and save himself from the argument. Su Jian watched as his exasperated aunt struggled with her headache. The little bean was the spice in Li Ru's life. "It was an offhand remark and now we have this," she said. Then, Su Jian decided to make an offhand remark. "Your credibility will take a hit if you start lying to children." The little bean figured Su Jian was on her side. She waddled over to him and climbed into his lap. "Brother, bring me there." Gi Tower cost 1 silver tael on average per person. Su Jian said, "Lu Er, take her." The little bean was carried away. Li Ru kicked her husband under the table and pointed at Su Jian with her pursed lips. Su Pingzi was mildly embarrassed as he looked at his own son who was once an avid pursuer of knowledge. Su Xinian was socially dead and the dead did not talk. The young man ate his food silently. The dishes were bland as there was no broth to be had. The kitchen had just started up when the family returned. Su Jian chewed the wax-like food and turned to the pretty sister. "Lingyu, why are you staring at me?" Although Su Jian is their cousin, the Su family children often refer to him as their eldest sibling. Wang is the most common last name in China. As such, it is used as a placeholder for the man whom your wife cheated with, the biological father of your child, etc. Chapter 9. The Angry Ant. Su Lingyu stuttered. The young girl's face turned red as the family stared at her. The attention brought tears to her almond-shaped eyes. I like this sister. A softy who cries easily, Su Qian thought. Su Lingyu puffed up her cheeks and raised her head. She met Su Qian's eyes and said, I want to know, how did you solve the case with just the scroll? The question got Su Xinian's attention. The young man raised his head slightly. Su Xinian often boasted about his intelligence, yet he had not managed to solve the case. Instead, Su Qian had done the impossible soon after receiving the scroll from him. There was a blank expression on Li Ru's face, but her chopstick slowed down a fraction and she stopped chewing. There is no such thing as a perfect crime. Outside of the occasional coincidence, any deed done by man leaves a trace, Su Qian said. The words made Su Xinian's ears perk up. Firstly, I went through the path taken by the cargo. The timing did not make sense, which led me to suspect something was wrong with the load. Su Qian regaled the investigation process. As he spoke, Su Xinian listened with rapt attention as if he was attending a private class. He had his hands clenched in fists beneath the table. When Su Qian was done, Su Xinian gave a flat response. Not bad. Everyone in the family knew the young man was stingy with words. The 16-year-old sister lowered her head to hide her admiration. Su Pingzi slammed his hand on the table and spat a curse word in slang. I can't believe I was fooled. Su Xinian shot his father a look that meant, it would be suspicious if you noticed. Su Qian stared at his uncle and a line came to his mind. Uncouth as it may be, F***ck is the most versatile word one can use in response to any situation. His uncle was a martial artist who had minimal schooling. He could write his own name, albeit rather crookedly. Meanwhile, his aunt was unimpressed. You uncultured man. Please mind your manners at the dinner table. Su Qian asked, when they were counting the silvers, did they wear gloves? Su Pingzi recalled the events of that day. Yes, I think so. How did you know? Was it really sodium? Su Qian glanced at his uncle and asked, why was that detail not in the scroll? It was a small matter, so I didn't think to mention. It's all that Lu fellow's fault. He gave me a bottle of Osman, thus honey wine. You know how my alcohol tolerance is. I got greedy and had 1 cup too many. If you didn't ask, I probably would have forgotten about that detail, Su Pingzi grumbled. If it weren't for you and your fellow, I would have cracked the case sooner. What a waste of brain power, Su Qian thought, then sighed. In Su Pingzi's eyes, the gloves were just a part of the people's outfits which was unrelated to the case at hand. The extra protective gear did not raise any suspicion. Sounds like that Lu fellow you mentioned is highly suspicious. Su Xinian cut straight to the chase. My mistake nearly ruined our family, Su Pingzi lamented. Ninjian, when your father and I fought at the Battle of Shanhai Pass, we made a promise to come back alive. We wanted to achieve so much. Your father died in that battle because he took a fatal hit that was meant for me. At that moment, I swore I would do better, for us. He refused to be cannon fodder. It was my plan to send little Nian for study while you learn martial arts. Li Ru rolled her eyes. Your heart was always with your biological nephew. More than 100 silver taels a year. Do you mean to say Xinian is not his? Su Qian swore those words did not come from him. It was a knee-jerk reaction. The negative feelings the host had for the aunt was significant. You horrible child. How dare you take that tone with me? Li Ru slammed her hand on the table. The son and the elder daughter kept their heads down. They were used to the bickering. Su Pingzi spoke up, enough. I was spared the executioner's block today, don't make me regret living. Everyone lowered their heads and ate their dinner. Speaking of the Battle of Shanhai Pass, Su Qian had vague memories of it. This world was vast and the Daifeng dynasty had laid claim to the Central Plains. Daifeng was formed through military might and governed by erudites. At the height of its glory, many kingdoms came forth to pay their respects. The succession was unbroken for 600 years. 20 years ago, Daifeng had formed an alliance with the nations of the western region to pacify the northern and southern barbarians. The decisive battle was at Shanhai Pass. All the participating nations had contributed their armies. 1,000,000 souls were on that battlefield. Countless lives were lost in that battle that carried on for half a year. It was a bloody and ferocious battle that went down in history, known as the Battle of Shanhai Pass. Su Qian's father was one of the many casualties. From my rough calculation based on internet facts and literature, no dynasty has lasted more than 300 years, Su Qian thought to himself. He named the phenomenon, the 300-year curse. As a history buff, he had gone through 5,000 years of history and noticed a pattern. Barring the absolute monarchs who controlled every aspect of their country and the weakening Zhou dynasty, no dynasty has managed to escape the 300-year curse. The Song dynasty and Han dynasty had to go through reformations to stay in power. Su Qian suspected the mystical powers of this world had a play in the Daifeng dynasty's long reign. Lu Er reappeared with the little bean in tow. Su Lingyan was hungry and no longer crying. She sat in Lu Er's lap as she was too short for the table. The young girl suddenly recalled the misery she had gone through. "Mother, why did we have to stay in the dark room? I was so hungry there." The dark room was the jail cell. No one at the dinner table said a word. Liu gave her daughter a pitying look. Su Pingzi told his daughter, "Father made a mistake." The young girl hummed a response, then said, "I woke up hungry yesterday and caught a bug. It had this on its head." She put her hand on her head and extended 2 fingers. Cockroach. The jail cells were full of cockroaches and rats. The atmosphere in the room was sullen. It was a failure on their part that a child had to suffer. You ate it?" Liu's voice trembled as tears sprang to her eyes. She gave birth to her youngest daughter in her 30s. Despite the child's questionable mental capacity, she loved the little girl. Su Lingyan's delicate voice carried through the room. "I wanted to, then I heard mother's stomach growling." There was a tense silence. Liu's face paled as she asked, "And? I put the bug in your mouth." "You swallowed it real quick," the little bean said with pride. Liu's body shuddered. Su Xinian slowly placed his bowl and chopsticks on the table. "I'm done." Su Lingyu followed suit. "Me too." Su Qian took that as his cue to leave. "I'm full too." Su Pingzi was speechless. A few seconds later, Liu bent to one side and vomited. Then, a loud, juvenile cry cut through the night. Chapter 10. A murder in the county. Countless stars illuminated the cloudless night sky. The observatory, also known as the headquarters of the imperial astronomers, was the tallest building in Jingzhou City. The young woman dressed in a yellow robe ascended the steps effortlessly. As she passed the 7th floor, she heard a clamor coming from the Red Room. A group of white-robed alchemists were engaged in a heated argument. "Another failure? It's supposed to be a simple step. Told you the salt concentration was incorrect." "No, I believe it's the water. I think the flame is the issue. I saw many burn the salt. To change salt into silver is impossible. I can't do it." Wei smirked and muttered under her breath, "These people are still trying to produce counterfeit silver." 2 days ago, she had come back to the observatory with the salt and silver story, and none of the disciples believed her. Salt could be transmuted into silver. Even a 3-year-old would not believe such falsehoods. However, when the case of the missing tax money was solved, the emperor, seeing the potential of the mystical fake silver, had ordered the imperial astronomers to perform the transmutation. Thus began the never-ending work for the alchemy experts of the imperial astronomers. They had been toiling away for 2 days, yet they had nothing to show for. "Wei, it's Wei," someone called out. One by one, the haggard faces turned around and stared at her with hopeful eyes. Kwei, how did you turn salt into fake silver? Kwei, can you check if the procedure is correct? You're the only person who has successfully done it. The disciples surrounded the young woman. Chu Kwei had no choice but to enter the Red Room and observe their transmutation attempts. Another failure, one of the alchemists lamented. Where is the mistake? The group of white robes asked in a suppliant tone. I performed the same steps, Chu Kwei said mysteriously. It is an arcane technique passed down from ancient texts, not something that is easily learned. It involves breaking down a complicated matter and absorbing the pieces to see the whole picture. Let me share with you a mnemonic chant, listen closely. Captivated by Kwei's words, the disciples leaned forward in anticipation. Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon, sodium, magnesium, aluminium, silicon, phosphorus. In a single breath, Kwei delivered the impressive line. The words were gibberish to the audience. It was clear no one knew what to do with the chant. What does it mean? Chu Kwei gave them an enigmatic smile. I, myself, have no idea. Amazing. Whoever wrote the chant is a genius, someone said. Chu Kwei's smile never faltered. Genius? Dream on. Kwei, where did you learn about the chant? Did you receive guidance from an alchemy master? A good question. Chu Kwei had intended to subtly reveal the person's identity. The man is Su Qian, the nephew of the 7th-ranked official from the armed guards, Su Pingzi. He will teach you the rest. The mention of a martial artist upsetted the group. Is that a joke? A disciple of the imperial astronomers seeking an outsider's help. A martial artist, no less. If word got out, we will be the laughing stock of the city. The classification system gave rise to prejudices and friction among disciplines. Taoism and Buddhism were always at odds with each other. Sorcerers looked down on wizards and wizardesses who looked down on warlocks and witches who, in turn, despised sorcerers. Then, all the above had a bone to pick with the martial artists. As for the Confucians, well, they believed everyone else was garbage. However, the recent generations of Confucians had substantially weakened. Kwei, won't you teach us? Kwei hummed and said, next time. She made her escape and continued her upward journey. To be honest, she knew nothing about the transmutation. The only successful attempt she had seen was in Jingzhou quartz. Kwei had tried her hand at the process but failed to produce any fake silver. She had replicated the steps, and yet it was a failure. She did not understand why. On the highest floor of the observatory was an octagonal roof terrace that resembled the 8 trigrams, hence the name, 8 trigrams terrace. At the edge of the terrace was an old man dressed in a white robe. He was seated before a table with a wine cup in his hand. His head rested on the other arm as he semi-drunkenly gazed upon Jingzhou city. Kwei was amused, but she did not disturb the old man. Her master spent most of his time drinking on the 8 trigrams terrace and enjoying the view. He did not appreciate interruptions. The old man squinted his eyes as if he was learning from humanity. Then, he smiled. Kwei. Master. The young woman returned the smile as she jogged over to his side. The winds made her skirt flutter. What were the gifts from the emperor? A few hundred silver taels and a few bolts of silk fabric. After a pause, she asked, Master, what is the fake silver made of? I do not know. There are things unknown to the master. There are many. For example, I don't know where the thieves from 19 years ago are, the old man said with a chuckle. You always bring them up, but you never tell me who they are or what they stole. The old man stood and walked to the edge of the terrace. He let out a deep sigh. It was a priceless thing they took. Then, do you know who produced those fake silvers? The imperial astronomers were the founders of sorcery and by extension, alchemy. All alchemic practice was related to the imperial astronomers in one form or another. There was an alchemist involved in the case of the missing tax money, not just an ordinary disciple, but someone who knew about the mystical metal. Naturally, the moonlight shone into the room located in the inner courtyard. Su Qian laid on his bed and stared at the criss-crossed beams above him. There was a mixture of trepidation and excitement as he thought about his future. As a product of the 9-year compulsory education system, I should have an advantage here. He should be able to stand out among the people. However, he was still uneasy about the absolute power bestowed about the monarch. The lack of human rights meant a pat on the back could easily turn into a knife. The insecurity would be a bane to any modern-day citizen. Such thoughts followed Su Qian into dreamland. When morning came, he woke up and put on his black uniform. He tied the sash around his waist and combed his long hair. The sword went on last secured at the side of his waist. Back straight and eyes focused, he looked good in uniform. He could not deny the traditional garments did wonders for his appearance and presentation, though going to the loo was a hassle. Su Qian crossed the wall and grabbed a bite at his uncle's place. Su Pingzi was reinstated as an official, and so the two men left the manor for work. Changle County was a peripheral settlement to Jingzhou City. The Changle County Courts was located in the city, 6 to 7 miles from the Su Manor. Su Qian did not own a horse or a carriage. On foot, it took 30 minutes to reach his new workplace. The building for Changle County was north-facing and had 2 human-sized lion statues guarding the entrance. Beside the reddish-brown gates was a giant drum with its paint chipping off. The makeup of the county courts was worth explaining. At the top was the county magistrate, assisted by the deputy magistrate and official registrar. These positions were considered ranked officials in the courts. In the modern day, these positions would be roles of authority and leadership. Below the 3 court officials was the executive official. It was not a ranked position, thus unpopular. The remaining officials could be split into the stealthy, the swift, and the strong, who formed the guards maintaining peace and making arrests. They were also on standby to assist the 6 ministries of the courts. Su Qian worked in the swift class as a constable. He walked into the building as the executive official was performing the morning roll call. Executively saw Su Qian stride in with the standard issue sword at his waist and was taken aback. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. The officials noticed the change in expression on their leader's face and followed his gaze. Then, they too were in shock. Su Qian. Is that really you? Is that a ghost? Someone shouted among the crowd. Executively saw the shadow cast by Su Qian. He took a deep breath and said in a calm voice, "What kind of nonsense are you spouting in the courts? Do ghosts have shadows?" The officials peered at Su Qian's feet and let out a collective sigh of relief. Su Qian thought for a moment, then said, "Could be a walking corpse." The eyes of every official widened. Before panic could take root, Su Qian put his fist to his palm and saluted. "It is merely a joke. Salutations to the executive official and my fellow peers. I have been released from jail." Executively did not beat around the bush. What happened? They had heard news about the Su family being locked up for the missing silver tails. By the laws, a meritorious service can atone for a misconduct. The emperor was merciful and absolved the Su family of guilt. Su Qian regaled the story once more but made sure his uncle was named as the person responsible for their absolution. He pulled out the proof issued by the Jingzhou courts. Although the tax money was recovered, the sentencing had yet to conclude. It would be some time before the cogs of the legal courts churn out a verdict. The fact was unknown to the officials of the county courts. After the morning call, a few constables came over to congratulate Su Qian. "Ninjian, you should take us drinking." In this period, the courtesy name was used when addressing friends and acquaintances, while the birth name was used during self-introductions. That's right. Good luck will come after you survived a disaster. Drinks on you. I hear the playhouse facing the river brought in a new batch of performers. Ninjian, let's pay them a visit tonight. Drinks are fine, but you want me to pay for women. Su Jian was about to reject their invitation and cite his poor financial status when he stepped on something hard and bumpy. He looked down to find a piece of silver fragment. Was this the good luck that came after a disaster? He stopped his tracks and pretended to be enjoying the view. As the group advanced without him, Su Jian quickly bent down and collected the fragment. He stealthily deposited the fragment into his coin purse. He made his way through the long corridor and ended up in the Western Hall. Minutes later, Executive Li strode in with purpose. He looked at the head constable and said, "Constable Wang, the county magistrate has summoned us." A pained expression was etched on Constable Wang's face, but he said nothing and went with Executive Li. Su Jian watched the retreating figure of the constable and asked, "Why's he so grumpy?" "While you were in jail, there's been a murder on Kongping Street. The dead is a wealthy merchant, so the county magistrate has been in a foul mood. Constable Wang has to endure his harangues every day." Su Jian chewed on a sunflower seed. "Why is the magistrate mad over a merchant's death? Murder was always a heinous crime, but as a fifth-ranked official of the imperial courts, the county magistrate should be unfazed. The merchant has kin among the board of imperial advisors. I suspect they're pressuring him. Plus, it's the 37th year. 37th year." Su Jian did not understand the significance. Inspections, the bailiff enlightened. Chapter 11. Fishing. The officials in Dafeng had to undergo inspections every 3 years. They would be evaluated based on the 4 sections of the imperial examinations and the 8 exclusions. Officials who failed inspection would be demoted or sacked. The inspections explained the county magistrate's bad mood, especially when the victim had kin among the board of imperial advisors. The murder investigation in Changle County had the potential to be politicized. Su Jian asked absent-mindedly, "How did the man die?" "He went to the countryside to collect rent and came back in the middle of the night. Ran into a thief in his courtyard and was killed," a colleague said. "Any witnesses?" Su Jian asked. The wife heard a commotion and went out to check. By the time she reached the courtyard, the man was already dead. "We noticed some footprints on the outer wall. Any enemies?" "An intentional murder disguised as a theft gone wrong." Su Jian poured himself a cup of tea and took a few honey-coated candies from his colleague. He tossed them into his tea. Su Jian's mind flashed back to the times when he and his colleagues discussed homicide cases at the police station. "We took testimonials from the family, the household staff and the neighbors. The victim did not have any enemies recently." "How about the soldiers on night patrol?" "The armed guards said they saw no one suspicious that night. Jingzhou City had 3 city walls, the Imperial Wall, the inner wall and the outer wall. Soldiers patrolled the outer wall. The outer city area had no curfew and the gates never closed. The merchant would have made the necessary arrangements and obtained a permit that would allow him to freely enter and exit the city. The open gate system was beneficial to the merchants and traders, which greatly boosted the economy." Su Jian nodded. "If this was a theft gone wrong, the thief must know the ins and outs of Kongping Street." "How can one be sure?" The bailiffs were taken aback by Su Jian's confidence. The thief could enter and leave the manor without being noticed by the night patrol. They must have surveyed the area and were with the armed guards routine. As Su Jian analyzed, he reached for his pocket for a smoke. His hand came back empty. He was reminded of his days in the police station. His colleagues often sat together and smoked while they talked about cases. It was there where he picked up the bad habit. The others were amazed by Su Jian's analysis. "That makes sense. How did we miss that detail?" After a trip to jail, Ninjian is a new man. Smarter than before for sure. In this period, there was no formal education system. Hence, the investigations were handled by constables who relied on their experience. The constable with the best track record would be promoted to head constable. It didn't occur to you guys, but I'm sure Constable Wang thought about it. Anyone question the people in the West End? Su Jian said. 2 days of questioning but no suspects. The West End of the city was the slums where the dregs of society congregated. Whenever the city's peace was threatened, the bailiffs would enter the slums and make an arrest. How much was stolen? Su Jian needed more details about the case. A colleague stared at Su Jian for a moment there. The man sounded like the county magistrate. None. The victim returned with some broken silver, copper coins and grain. The thief couldn't have left with a large chest of silver after killing someone. That was odd. Su Jian squinted and thought, if I was the thief and I knew the victim's routine, I would have chosen another day to enter the manor. He kept his theory to himself and continued snacking on the sunflower seeds, all the while keeping an ear to his colleague's idle chatter. A pity the wife was widowed at such a young age. Her body is impeccable. You can't find someone like her in the playhouse. I'd pay a silver tael a night if she was available. She's not that young, 20 years her husband's junior. Unlikely a woman in her 30s will stay widowed. At that point, Su Jian spoke up, a woman in her 30s is ideal. She has life experience and knows how to take care of others. His colleagues disagreed with his futuristic view and taunted him. Being a martial artist at the refinement state, he had to retain his virginity. Once his chi energy was released, it would be difficult to open Heaven's Gate. Therefore, Su Jian had never succumbed to a lady's charm. In the county magistrate's hall, the head constable stood with his head low. He had a tan complexion much like a weather-beaten farmer. He zoned out as the county magistrate carried out the scolding. The county magistrate was a portly man with a fair complexion. He hailed from the Yan province and became a third rank Jinshi in Yuanjing year 20. A man of average governance skills, he made it this far by currying favor and networking. Fortunately, he was a man of moderation. He took small bribes but never caused trouble for the empire. Unfortunately, he was bad-tempered and often swore at his subordinates. Useless. Absolutely useless. After learning that Constable Wang had no new leads on the case, Magistrate Zhu was furious. You're the most experienced constable we have, and yet you have nothing after days of investigation. Sweat dripped from Constable Wang's forehead and he felt pinpricks on his back. The upcoming inspections worsened the county magistrate's temper. Executively kept his lips sealed as he watched his friend of many years get yelled at by his superior. Executively knew the county magistrate was aiming for a promotion. The criteria for promotion were connections and achievements. Without supporting evidence to back up a promotion, the official could easily be impeached. Hence, one must fulfill both criteria to ascend the ranks confidently. What kind of achievements? The inspections were one of the standard evaluations. 15 minutes later, Magistrate Zhu stopped and brought the cup of tea to his lips. It was customary to take a sip of tea when sending off guests. Executively noticed the gesture and signaled Constable Wang. The two men scurried out of the room. Constable Wang returned to the break room with a scowl on his face. A hush fell over the room when he stepped in as everyone glanced cautiously at the head constable. Magistrate Zhu gave you a scolding again. Constable Wang rolled his eyes and drank his tea. Son of AB*TCH, the man is dead and the thief is gone, what am I supposed to do? Such an unlucky day, I even lost a silver mace. Su Jian strained his ear to listen as he took a sip of his tea. Oh, so that was yours. Clearly, fate intended for you to lose it. When the head constable was done with his rant, one of the constables made a suggestion, maybe we can go fishing. Su Jian raised an eyebrow. In the lower courts, fishing meant finding a scapegoat. With limited techniques and resources, most investigations in the ancient period went nowhere. There were many instances of false convictions due to pressure from higher UPS. The fishing process went like this: a local official would be asked to provide a list of frequent offenders. The individual names would be written on pieces of paper, then random selection would determine who was the scapegoat. Hence, the lingo, fishing. Once the unlucky person was selected, the official would bring him to the courts and a forced confession would be obtained. The higher UPS would be pleased, the middle-ranked officials would be praised, the local officials would be rewarded. Overall, it was a positive experience. There would be little sympathy for the scapegoat. He was a rotten character after all. The people would appreciate having one less troublemaker on the streets. This was one of the many questionable practices that went on in the courts. Constable Wang said, "Guess it's our only option. Little Li, I'll leave this to you. Pick the older ones." "Hold up. Constable Wang, the case has clues that require a better look. It's not a dead end." Su Qian could not stand by and turn a blind eye to the injustice. Although he had left the force decades ago, his principles remained unyielding. The suspects gathered might be scoundrels, but they were not murderers. He did not believe death could not wipe away one's crime, but the victim's family deserved the truth. It would be a disservice to them if they employed a scapegoat. The real murderer had to be rightfully punished. Constable Wang's expression was sullen. He said nothing, but the glare he directed at Su Qian was telling. His colleagues gave their advice. "Ninjian, stay out of it. The magistrate has been berating us non-stop. It's not that bad, they're criminals after all." A colleague who was close to Su Qian said, "Ninjian's a bit sensitive about this. His family just got released from jail." Constable Wang ignored the chatter and met Su Qian's eyes. In a displeased tone, he said, "Tell me, how would you solve this?" Su Qian did not back down. "Hand me the scroll." A successful candidate of the highest level in imperial examinations. A traditional Chinese measurement of weight that was also used as a currency denomination. Chapter 12. An awe-inspiring analysis. Constable Wang was sullen and silent, unhappy to be trapped in the hot seat. Recently, Magistrate Zhu would inquire about the progress of the murder case first thing in the morning. When Constable Wang had nothing valuable to contribute, he would be met with a string of profanities. The pressure was wholly directed at the head constable. The other constables huddled beneath his wings, unhelpful ingrates who made his life harder. Constable Wang's annoyance was logical. He believed the burden was undeserving for someone as old as him. Su Qian took the scroll and went back to his table. As he perused the script, his colleagues gathered around him and exchanged glances. The best way to get into Constable Wang's good books was to solve the case. If the case was not solvable, Su Qian could make it up to Constable Wang by taking him to the brothels. Their friendship of years would not be jeopardized by such a small issue. Su Qian objected to fishing because of his principles. By taking on the case, he was also sharing the burden with Constable Wang. The murder victim was Zhang Yuryue, age 51. As one of the wealthiest men on Kongping Street, he owned several plots of fertile lands in Chang'an County and 3 shops that sold fabric, rouge, and general supplies. His first wife died young and he remarried. The second wife was 20 years his junior and came from a good family. His only son was by his first wife. 20 years age difference. Su Qian wanted to puke. What's the saying? Work hard for your future wife who is still in kindergarten. 4 days ago, Zhang Yuryue went to the countryside to collect rent. He came back at 3:00 in the morning. The sleeping wife was awoken by a scream and went out to check. She found Zhang Yuryue dead in the courtyard and reported seeing a black shadow jump over the wall. The murder was described as such. Su Qian read the coroner's report and noticed a discrepancy. He made a mental note and continued to the testimonials by family and staff. Then, he shut his eyes and sorted his thoughts. Constable Wang let out a huff and asked mockingly, "So, Constable Su, who's and where's the killer?" "Patience. From what I've read, the shoe prints on the outer wall and the wife's testimonial suggests the thief jumped over the wall. Is that the working theory? Constable Wang uttered an affirmative reply. The prints lead away from the crime scene, likely formed during the escape, Su Qian said. Constable Wang frowned. What's the problem? Why are there shoe prints? There was mud. Why was there mud? There's a flower bed by the wall. Su Qian nodded. Then why does the scroll say nothing about shoe prints leading into the courtyard? Constable Wang was speechless. The other constables tried to lend a hand. Perhaps the thief noticed the mud when he came in and didn't leave any prints. He was in a hurry after the murder and accidentally stepped into the mud. Su Qian's eyes swept across the room. That is a possibility, but did anyone check for a shoe print in the flower bed? Logically, if the thief could enter the courtyard without stepping on the flower bed, he should be able to leap over the wall without leaving a trace when he escaped. His colleagues exchanged looks and said nothing. Their silence was damning clearly. No one thought about that. None of the constables followed up on the details. Ninjian, what are you getting on about? Someone said indignantly. Su Qian turned to the frowning Constable Wang and said, the victim sustained a blow to the back of his head. It was a blunt weapon, yes. Constable Wang nodded. He died at the scene. Su Qian sat in his chair and asked, why a blunt weapon? A sharp weapon like a dagger would be more efficient in a struggle. The room was silent as they considered the question. Little Li made a guess. Perhaps the thief did not intend to kill. Wrong. It was not Su Qian who called out but Constable Wang. He stood up, eyes wide. It was a direct blow to the back of the head. The intention was to kill. Then, he sat back down and muttered, why a blunt weapon instead of a sharp? Su Qian suggested. Maybe the thief did not have a weapon on hand. Constable Wang's eyes glimmered as if he had discovered something, but the moment escaped him. One last thing that caught my attention. Su Qian glanced at the scroll and said, when the victim's family was brought to the courts, the wife fainted after kneeling for too long. The doctor's examination found that Yang Zhenzhen was pregnant. A posthumous child. It is unfortunate. The father is gone before the child is born. The ongoing commentary by the audience was irritating. Su Qian waited for the group to pipe down before speaking. Yang Zhenzhen has been married to the victim for almost 10 years and she just so happens to be pregnant at this moment. Maybe the child is not his. It was unusual for a healthy couple with a normal sex life to not produce a child in 10 years unless the couple intentionally avoided pregnancy. One of them must be infertile. The traditional methods of curing infertility were unreliable, therefore there was a slim chance infertile couples could conceive. Constable Wang exhaled deeply. Ninjian, elaborate please. Su Qian drank his tea to quench his thirst. Maybe it wasn't an unsuccessful theft but a murder of passion. Yang Zhenzhen was having an affair with someone, maybe an outsider or the victim's son. They planned to meet up when the victim was out collecting rent, but he came back earlier than expected and caught them in the act. An altercation broke out and the third person grabbed the nearest blunt object and killed the victim. To disguise the crime, they dragged the body into the courtyard and made it look like a thief broke into the manor. The man would have intricate knowledge of the neighborhood if he visits often. He would know the night patrol's schedule and be able to avoid the armed guards. If the thief was after money, he would not choose that day to enter the manor. A true thief would enter the manor after the victim had converted the silvers into a silver note. Yang Zhenzhen misled you into thinking the murder was related to the rent collection. Everyone in the room was slack-jawed. This you got all that just from reading the scroll. Ninjian, this is not a joking matter. But don't you think it makes sense? The audience was amazed yet confused by Su Qian's analysis. Su Qian remarked, I am proposing a possible scenario based on the case details. Every theory requires verification and proof. After analyzing the clues, solid evidence was needed to close the case. The thief had evaded the soldiers on night duty and entered the manor at an inconvenient time. A blunt weapon was used instead of a sharp, and Yang Zhenzhen's sudden pregnancy. All these facts were overlooked by others, but not Su Jian. Using logic, he teased out the truth from the hidden clues. Constable Wang felt as if their profession was on the cusp of a major transformation. He took a deep breath to calm himself. As he processed the young man's words, a question popped up in his mind. Why do you think the victim's son may be involved in the affair? Su Jian slowly sipped his tea as anxious eyes turned to him. 2 reasons. First, Zhang Xian's testimony mentioned he wasn't in bed with his wife as he was checking the accounts in the study, and yet he did not mention hearing a shout. Yang Zhenzhen said she was awoken by the commotion, but the one person who was awake that night did not hear anything. Suspicious. Second, if there was no sign of shoe prints entering the courtyard, it was unlikely the thief came from outside. Enlightenment. So, the shoe prints were set up to confuse us, Constable Wang said. Yes. Check the shoes of the victim's son, Su Jian advised. No way he left his shoe prints, old Wang said. Su Jian put on a look of awe and said with mock admiration, superb deduction skills. No wonder you're Daifeng's best constable. After the word vomit, Su Jian had reverted to his role as subordinate and gave the head constable a good lick on the backside. This put a smile on Constable Wang's face. Constable Wang stood a bit taller after that. I'll inform Magistrate Zhu. You guys get ready to follow me to the Zhang Manor. A look of unrestrained excitement flashed across Constable Wang's tan face. He gave Su Jian a thumbs up and left the break room in a hurry. A bellow of laughter was heard as he rushed off to find the county magistrate. A cosmetic for coloring the cheeks in varying shades, or the lips red. A banknote with a value in silver. Chapter 13. Interrogations. Unimpressed, Su Jian watched the head constable leave. Too many days had passed for a proper evidence collection. This era has no fingerprinting technology. There is no way Zhang Xian made the shoe prints himself. What other techniques can be used in this era to solve this case? Su Jian racked his brain for a solution. These low-level officials are only useful when there's profit to be gained. They'll dance like monkeys when money is involved. The county magistrate's anger resonated with his words. A murder case was a big deal, and this victim had familial ties to Master Su, who sat on the board of imperial advisors. Who was the board of imperial advisors? They were imperial censors who flaunted their power by doling out punishment to whomever they please. Anyone who crossed them would be impeached citing misconduct. The official registrar's gaunt face was decorated with a goatee. He let out a chuckle. They'll have to go fishing sooner or later. As seasoned officials, they knew the underhand tactics used by the low-level officials. When it came to manipulation, the low-level officials were akin to elementary school students. The masters were in the imperial courts while the governors of the border regions ranked second. Fishing when inspections are due? What am I supposed to say when the courts accuse us of misconduct? Magistrate Zhu said. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted their conversation. Constable Wang made his way into the hall. He stopped immediately after crossing the threshold and respectfully greeted, "We have a breakthrough in the Zhang murder case, Magistrate Zhu. Please issue a warrant for us to make the arrest." Magistrate Zhu and Registrar Su Wan exchanged a look. The former chuckled while the latter wore a knowing smile. Their expressions made Constable Wang hesitant. There is no time to lose. Magistrate Zhu slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Fool! Do you think I wouldn't know? Fishing at this stage? Are you dumb?" Under normal circumstances, a forced confession was acceptable, but there laid the problem. After a confession was obtained, the case would have to be handed over to the Ministry of Justice for sentencing. The inspections were due for the year-end, and there was a thrum of nervousness in the courts of Jingzhou City. Every official was being careful with their activities while keeping an eye on others, hoping to catch their enemies red-handed. It was a time of political uncertainty and any verdict could be reversed. Constable Wang hastened to clarify, "Please, you misunderstand. I am not fishing. I am confident we will nab the true perpetrator. Please believe me. Do you think I'm not aware of your abilities?" Magistrate Zhu eyed Constable Wang suspiciously. "State your case." Constable Wang was glad to explain. "Of course. The murder case has many oddities." Constable Wang reiterated Su Qian's theory for the two officials. As the explanation went on, Magistrate Zhu's disbelief changed into surprise. His back straightened unconsciously. In the end, he was silent with a stern expression on his face. He was deep in thought. Registrar Su clapped his hand and praised. "Amazing. A painstaking investigation conducted with logic and rationale. You pried out the truth from the tiniest of clues. Truly the best of our times. Of course, they still required evidence and verification, but the explanation gave the people of Changle County courts a direction in mind." Constable Wang smiled and said, "You're being too generous." Magistrate Zhu laughed and asked, "Who taught you such methods?" After a moment's thought, Constable Wang tamped down the urge to steal another man's achievement and said, "Fast Hand Su Qian." The designation was similar to the video sharing platform in the modern day. In the ancient period, it was used to address the officials in the Swift class. Su Qian Magistrate Zhu was the first to react. Him. Magistrate Zhu had gone for drinks with Su Pingzi in the past and they were on good terms. A few years ago, Su Pingzi had spent 20 silver taels to get his nephew a job. In Daifeng, an official's job can be passed down to his son. Therefore, it was considered a stable source of income for the family. Magistrate Zhu smiled. "That's the boy." Registrar Su recalled the case of the missing tax money and asked, "What do you mean?" Constable Wang paid close attention to their exchange. A smile was on the county magistrate's face when he said, "The Su family was embroiled in the high-profile case regarding the missing tax silvers. Why do you think the family was let off without a scratch?" "I heard it was Su Pingzi of the armed guards who assisted with the investigation and thus was absolved by the emperor," said Constable Wang. "That was the story told by Su Qian." Registrar Su glanced at Magistrate Zhu and asked, "Is there some inside story?" The missing tax money case was beyond Registrar Su's jurisdiction. The county magistrate would have more access to information, though he was considered a small potato in Jingzhou City. Without the backing of powerful officials, one would not expect a long tenure. Magistrate Zhu chuckled. "Su Pingzi is a rough-edged martial artist. He was nothing but a scapegoat in this case." The county magistrate paused as if not wanting to reveal too much, then said, "He's not the reason behind the Su family's release." "Who then?" Constable Wang asked. Registrar Su had an inkling he knew the real story, but he waited for the county magistrate to continue. Magistrate Zhu said, "Su Qian. It was he who solved the case. His name is recorded in the scroll, according to an acquaintance of mine who works in the Jingzhou courts. A father's crime can be absolved with a son's meritorious act. Although he is just a nephew, the basic principle stands." Registrar Su whistled and said, "Su Qian would have been in jail while the investigation was ongoing. How did he crack the case?" "I found it unbelievable too, but now I understand," Magistrate Zhu said knowingly. "The scroll." Registrar Su arrived at the same idea and was shocked. With only the written information, Constable Wang was rarely able to catch wind of the higher UPS gossip, but this round, he was truly dumbfounded. He did not believe Su Qian could single-handedly solve a case that had everyone stumped. It made no sense to Constable Wang. When Su Qian had first come to him, he was a hot-headed youngster who approached every case head-on. When did the brash young man become an expert in solving cases? When Constable Wang came back to the break room with the warrant, Su Qian was asleep at his desk. He had spent the previous night thinking about a variety of things and fell asleep after the third gong. Other constables moved to wake Su Qian, but Constable Wang raised his hand and said, "Let him sleep." He selected 2 constables. "Come with me to the Zhang Manor." The 3 men summoned their civilian guards and left the Changle County courts in a group of 9. The civilian guard was formed from temporary conscription. Civilians were recruited and made to work without pay, lodgings, or food. On the bright side, they were not required to bear any responsibility. Su Qian was jolted awake by the rallying cry. He wiped away his drool and walked toward the main court. He figured they must have successfully captured the suspects and the interrogations were underway. In the main court, Magistrate Zhu sat at the judge's desk on the dais. Beside him, further to the back, were the court officer and court runner. Before the dais, the 3 classes of low-level officials gathered in 2 groups. Between them knelt the 2 suspects, a young man in an embroidered green robe and a beautiful woman in a purple silk dress. The woman wore a distraught expression, a contrast to the young man's unperturbed demeanor. Magistrate Zhu slammed the table and called out, "State your name." The woman glanced at the young man. He gave her a serene look before straightening his back. "I am Zhang Xian." The woman said in a soft voice, "I am Yang Zhenzhen." Magistrate Zhu asked, "How did the both of you kill Zhang Yuryui? Be honest." The woman was taken aback by the accusation. Her eyelashes fluttered as she tried to find her words. Zhang Xian was shocked, but he spoke, "Where is this accusation coming from? Why would I kill my father? Where were you when the murder occurred?" Magistrate Zhu asked. "I was in the study." "Why were you not with your wife?" "I was checking the books." "Who can verify your whereabouts?" "No one was awake at that time of night." Zhang Xian's answers were coherent and unhurried. Either he had a clear conscience or he had had practice. Su Qian believed it was the latter. Although Zhang Xian did not have a verified alibi, there was no hard evidence pinning the murder on him. A theory was only a theory and the man was innocent until proven guilty. The county magistrate turned to the woman. "Yang Zhenzhen, you were married to Zhang Yuryui for 10 years yet bore him no children. How is it that you are pregnant now? I urge you to answer honestly, did you and Zhang Xian have improper relations and conspired to murder your husband?" Yang Zhenzhen cried out. "No. My body is weak and I have been following the doctor's advice daily to improve my health. It has been difficult but we managed to conceive. How can you accuse me of killing my husband?" The floodgates opened and tears streamed down her face. Su Qian watched the scene and wondered, how to obtain the truth. A feasible idea entered his mind. Unrelated to the main character's family. Chapter 14. Psychological Games. Magistrate Zhu's palm came down on the judge's desk. He said in a booming voice, "Your testimony states you saw the murderer's silhouette as he leaped over the walls. The constables checked the flower bed today, there was neither a footprint nor any signs of disturbance." Yang Zhenzhen's eyes widened. Her beautiful almond eyes darted around. "This I..." Zhang Xian immediately said, "Why would my mother know how the thief entered our home? A lack of evidence found by the constables does not mean we committed the crime." "Mother? Don't tarnish the word," Su Qian thought. Magistrate Zhu chided, "A glib tongue you have there. Bring out the whip." It was common for interrogations in the olden days to involve corporal punishment. There was only so much one could do when there was so little evidence. Hence, confessions were often obtained under duress. Without the right facilities and techniques, it was incredibly difficult to collect evidence. Hence, corporal punishment became an invaluable element of the law. The pros and cons were unavoidable. Zhang Xian said loudly, "Is this the way of the courts? My uncle is a part of the Ministry of Rights and the Board of Imperial Advisors. Are you not worried about an impeachment?" The uncle he spoke of was a distant relative. Although the blood they shared was thin, their bond was strong. The Zhang family often brought the relative benefits. The threat was delivered with pinpoint accuracy. Magistrate Zhu's eyebrows were slanted. He knew the Zhang family had connections. Are you threatening me? 20 lashes for the man. 4 bailiffs strode forward. Zhang Xian's neck was held in place by 2 men with staffs while the other 2 stripped his pants. When the lashing began, the main court was filled with shouts of pain. Magistrate Zhu watched on with a neutral expression. 20 lashes with the thick cane was insufficient to extract a confession, perhaps 50 lashes would do it. However, there was a risk of killing the suspect. Even if Zhang Xian confessed, the verdict could be reversed after the case was passed on to the Ministry of Justice. After all, he had a relative on the board of imperial advisors. The whole case might backfire and cause problems for the county courts. As Zhang Xian was being punished, Su Qian waved the court runner over. After some hesitation, the man stepped down and jogged towards Su Qian. Tell the magistrate to call for a break. I have an idea, Su Qian said in a low voice. The court runner appeared reluctant. What plans do you have? Please don't drag me into something nonsensical. Nothing good will come from continuing the trial. The magistrate is on thin ice, so he'll agree to my suggestion. I'll treat you to drinks later, Su Qian said. Fine. The court runner approached Magistrate Zhu and relayed the message. Magistrate Zhu quickly turned Su Qian's way. Then, he sighed and looked forward. With a loud slam, he announced, lock them away. We will resume the session after a break. Magistrate Zhu took the cup of tea from the servant girl and sipped silently. Su Qian had some courtroom experience. When he was with the force, he brought his cup to his lips. They had retired to the inner hall. Su Ningjian, what is your suggestion? Su Qian was surprised by Magistrate Zhu's friendly tone. In his memories, the county magistrate had always treated the low-level officials unkindly. Did he change after Su Qian crossed over? I have something in mind, Su Qian said. Without using force? Yes. Magistrate Zhu was intrigued. He put down his cup. Explain. You don't know anything about game theory, so what can I say? Su Qian replied with a smile, allow me some time with them while you sit here and relax. Yang Zhenzhen was brought into a locked room. Her eyes were wet with tears as she trembled in her seat. She expected trouble from her captor, but he left after placing her in the room. It did nothing to soothe her anxiety. Thud. The wooden door slid open and a young man dressed in a constable uniform walked in. He was tall and broad with a nice set of facial features. Don't be tense, I'm just here for a casual chat. You can call me Sir Su, the young man said with a smile as he gave her a cup of tea. A snake named Su. The courteous gesture made Yang Zhenzhen suspicious. She stared warily at the young man. Su Qian took stock of the woman before him. She was a natural beauty with an aura comparable to his aunt, a suitable wife for a rich merchant. At 30 years of age, she would be a great catch in the modern world. Su Qian started the conversation. Those gold and silver accessories, Zhang Yuryui must have treated you well. Yang Zhenzhen neither agreed nor denied. Su Qian continued speaking, in my opinion, given your age, Zhang Yuryui is likely the reason behind the lack of children. The gentle and polite tone threw Yang Zhenzhen for a loop. She was expecting a grueling interrogation. The constable was not what she expected. It was rare to hear men be blamed for a couple's infertility. Su Qian's words were a breath of fresh air that made Yang Zhenzhen lower her guard. It is my fault, my womb is unproductive. We were childless for so many years, and now, my husband is gone. As she said the words, her eyes reddened. The dead cannot come back. Did Zhang Yuryui ever visit the pleasure house? Frequently. Which merchant or official doesn't? Speak cautiously. A 50-year-old who frequently spends his money in the pleasure house. I can almost confirm the child in your womb is not your husband's. The girls in the pleasure house are often fertile. The same can be said about a woman who guards an empty bedchamber. Su Qian made a clicking noise with his tongue. Zhang Yuryui was an old man who spent much of his time at the pleasure house. You were neglected, so cheating is understandable. However, murder is never justified. Yang Zhenzhen's face hardened. I don't understand what you're saying. I've read the case. Zhang Xian is 7 years younger than you. Su Jian gave the woman a knowing smile. What is your point? Said Yang Zhenzhen in a deadpan manner. You're a cradle snatcher. Su Jian chuckled. I don't understand. The woman was truly confused by the phrase. Okay, let's talk about something you know. You were left alone in the bedchamber every night and you started feeling lonely, so you seduced your stepson and committed an immoral act. On the night of the murder, you had planned to make use of your husband's absence and have an affair with your stepson. You did not expect Zhang Yuryui to return home early. He caught the two of you red-handed and father and son got into a fight. Then, you grabbed a vase and struck him on the head. To hide your crime, both of you dragged his body to the courtyard to make it look like a failed theft attempt. Zhang Xian intentionally left a print on the wall to corroborate your story. The color on Yang Zhenzhen's cheeks faded as she stared at Su Jian. Sweaty hands clenched tightly by her side, she shouted, No. I am innocent. She was panicking. Su Jian's interrogation skills honed over the years were being put to good use. The gentle demeanor was gone, replaced with an impassive attitude. Aren't you curious about how I knew all this? It's because Zhang Xian has come clean, Su Jian said. Impossible disbelief flashed in Yang Zhenzhen's eyes, but her fear was starting to show. She was white as a sheet, but she held firm. I am innocent. You trust your partner to keep a secret? Su Jian asked in a neutral tone. Although the constable never threatened her, the woman felt her hackles raised. Su Jian said, Perhaps you thought the cleanup was done perfectly. Well, let me tell you, there were flaws in your plan. First, Zhang Xian only left prints leading away from the courtyard but not prints leading into. If the thief was capable of entering without a trace, exiting should not be an issue. Second, Zhang Yuryui died from a blunt weapon to the head. According to Defeng's laws, trespassing will earn 180 lashes and the owner has the right to kill the intruder on sight. Su Jian tapped the table. So why didn't the thief not carry a sharp weapon? That would make more sense. Yang Zhenzhen was dumbfounded. I'm still not done. Su Jian gave the woman a cold smile. Once he had gotten through Yang Zhenzhen's defenses, he delivered the killing blow. A Chinese homonym. Chapter 15. A bad habit that would last millennia. Su Jian continued his explanation. Third, why do the county courts believe you two killed Zhang Yuryui instead of a thief? It was smart of you to drag the body out into the courtyard to disguise it as a thief's work, but a mistake was made. Zhang Yuryui died with his feet facing the manor proper, head facing the streets. The killing blow was on the back of his head, which meant the murderer was behind him. If the murderer was a thief, he would either stay hidden or retreat. Why would he murder the man and leave empty-handed? Yang Zhenzhen was stunned to learn about all the holes in her plot. Su Jian's words were a slap to her face. She felt as if her plan was laid bare for all to see and she had failed to cover her tracks. Fear gripped her. Speechless now. Zhang Xian too, hence his confession. He even said you threatened him with the baby in your womb after he decided to stop the affair. Then, you took the commotion that night to kill Zhang Yuryui. Zhang Xian is an innocent man. Acknowledging the failings in the plan, he realized there was no way out. He admitted his crime to the county magistrate and is willing to pay 500 silver taels to improve relations and pin the crime on you. The despair on Yang Zhenzhen's face was evident. Her face was white as a sheet after hearing about Zhang Xian's betrayal. Su Jian intentionally hammered the point in. I think you know what Zhang Xian is capable of. Truthfully, he knew nothing about Zhang Xian, but he was willing to bet a relationship built on lust would crumble easily. Furthermore, Zhang Xian was the son of a merchant. He was young and rich, a sea of opportunities awaited him. Why would he give up his life for an older woman? Yang Zhenzhen felt hopeless. However, the county magistrate is a morally upright man. He wanted to hear your side of the story, hence why I am here. If you come clean, he swears he will forego the death penalty. The woman lifted her head, her eyes were filled with tears as she clung onto the lifeline offered. Are you being truthful? Su Jian nodded. Yes. He noted Yang Zhenzhen's crumbling resolve and opened the door. The court officer stepped in to make an official record. Once her guard was down, Yang Zhenzhen spilled her guts out. Her confession had some discrepancies with his theory. Her tone had gone from stepson, please take care of yourself, to you Shoal, are you calling me old? All it took was a moment of pleasure to burn down the whole family. According to Yang Zhenzhen, when her husband found out about the affair, he got into an altercation with his son. Zhang Xian grabbed a vase and slammed it over her husband's head, causing him to collapse. In order to avoid charges, he conspired with Yang Zhenzhen to cover up the murder. They were both common folk with limited knowledge of criminal investigations. Unlucky for them, the discrepancies were immediately picked up by Su Jian. Once the confession was written down, Su Jian and the court officer left the room. In his 20-odd years of service in the courts, the court officer had never seen an interrogation proceed as witnessed. Your interrogation technique is truly unique and impressive. I have never seen anything like it. To take advantage of a suspect's plight is a rudimentary tactic. It's only surprising to you ancient fellows. Su Jian waved his hand and said, a minor accomplishment. He had decided to work on Yang Zhenzhen as she was less knowledgeable of the law. The lack of education was typical for a woman of this era. During the round questioning in the main court, Su Jian had observed the suspects and found the woman to be plagued with uncertainty and doubt. Hence why he went with this approach. It was a bluff he presented to Yang Zhenzhen. According to the laws, conspiratorial mariticide was punishable by death by 1,000 cuts for the spouse and a public beheading for the co-conspirator. There was no getting off the death penalty. In this case, it was Zhang Xian who committed the murder. The punishment for patricide was also death by 1,000 cuts. Su Jian cared little about the method of execution, but he did not believe Yang Zhenzhen deserved the death penalty for being an accessory to murder. It went against his principles from a previous life. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Adaptability is the greatest survival skill, Su Jian told himself. When Zhang Xian knew Yang Zhenzhen had confessed, there was little he could do but plead guilty. Su Jian brought the records of both accounts to the inner hall. Magistrate Zhu had a cup in his left hand while his right hand held a scroll. He placed both items down when Su Jian walked in. How did it go? Su Jian placed the two written records on his table. Fortune is with us. Magistrate Zhu took the papers and read the accounts. When he was done, his palm hit the table as he shouted, "Bastards! Bastards!" He was disgusted by the acts committed by the stepmother and stepson. Once the rage simmered, he turned to look at Su Jian. He was very impressed by the young man's performance. Ninjian, your good deed will be remembered. Good job. It is all thanks to your great influence. I learned a lot here, Su Jian said in his sincerest tone. The glee on Magistrate Zhu's face was plain. When the session ended, Constable Wang indicated he wanted to treat the constables from the Swift class to drinks. The prices in that era were relatively stable and 1 silver mace was able to fetch a banquet worth of food in a large tavern. The stellar performance Su Jian had put on the case-cracking logic and unique interrogation method made him the star of the night. Even Constable Wang asked for pointers in the examination process. The woman was weak-hearted and easily cracked. It really isn't a big deal. Su Jian knew better than to self-praise, but his colleagues were amazed by his work. It was as if Su Jian had opened their minds to a new world. There was much enthusiasm in their toasts to Su Jian. After 3 rounds of drinks, the topic eventually strayed to the playhouse and brothels. Constable Wang took the spotlight. He patted Su Jian's shoulder and said, "Ninjian, let's take you to the playhouse for some fun today." The other constables exchanged knowing glances. Everyone knew Su Jian was a virgin. "Are you paying?" "No way, it costs a few silver maces," Constable Wang said. "If he's not paying," Su Jian replied, "then I'm not the type of guy you're looking for." Losing his virginity would mean Su Jian would never master his qi. The mention of the pleasure house and playhouse brought forth some of the host's memories. Su Jian parsed through the information and concluded. The playhouses were considered whorehouses that catered to the common folk. The pleasure houses were more esteemed establishments frequented by merchants and high-ranking officials. The class distinction was obvious. The pleasure houses were also closely related to the entertainment school. The women from the entertainment school are absolutely beautiful, their skin so delicate and supple. A disgraced official would see the women of his family thrown into the entertainment school, Constable Wang said. "I've only been to the pleasure house once with the county magistrate. I was lucky to see Lady Fuxiang, she was absolutely." Constable Wang trailed off as his mind wandered. Little Li asked, "Who is Lady Fuxiang? Did you have a go with her?" "She is the queen of flowers, the best of the entertainment school. I would have if she was available that day," Constable Wang boasted. Su Jian was curious. "How much a night?" 30 silver taels. Su Jian tossed some peanuts at Constable Wang and said, "Have some nuts, I think you're drunk." 30 silver taels could fetch a man multiple young women straight to his doorsteps. Humans love to drive up the price of everything, a bad habit that would last millennia. Su Jian concluded he would only pay such a price for a lay if he had lost his mind. Part 1 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.